For centuries, ancient masters have known a secret. The mind finds its deepest rest not through force or technique, but through the gentle guidance of timeless wisdom that speaks directly to the soul. Tonight, we will journey deep into the heart of this ancient wisdom. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. What you're about to hear isn't meditation in any traditional sense. These are wisdom stories, flowing one into another like a peaceful river, each carrying you further from the noise of daily life and deeper into natural, healing sleep. No effort is required, no special breathing techniques, no trying to empty your mind. Just the quiet relaxation of listening as these beautiful tales unfold, each one a soft step on the path to profound rest. So close your eyes if you haven't already. Let your breathing slow to its own natural rhythm. There's nowhere you need to go, nothing you need to figure out. Simply rest here. There lived once, in a mountain monastery far from the noise of cities, a young monk named Kogan. Like you, he knew the challenge of quieting an active mind. He had come to the monastery seeking peace, but found instead that his thoughts seemed even louder in the supposed silence of the temple. Each evening, as the other monks settled easily into meditation, Kogan would sit on his cushion, fighting an inner war. His mind raced with worries about tomorrow's duties, replaying conversations from the day, spinning stories about what others might think of him. The harder he tried to find silence, the louder his thoughts became. Night after night, Kogan would leave the meditation hall frustrated and exhausted. His sleep was fitful, disturbed by the same restless energy that plagued his sitting practice. He began to despair that peace was not meant for someone like him, someone whose mind simply wouldn't cooperate with stillness. One evening, feeling particularly defeated after another session of mental chaos, Kogan wandered into the monastery garden. The moon was full, casting silver light across the carefully tended stones and plants. He sat on a wooden bench beneath an old pine tree, not to meditate, but simply because he was too tired to walk further. As he sat there, not trying to be peaceful, not attempting any spiritual practice, Kogan began to notice something he had never observed before. The night was not silent at all. Water trickled softly from a small fountain. Wind whispered through the pine needles above his head. In the distance, a night bird offered its gentle call to the darkness. But beneath and around all these sounds was something else. A vast, welcoming silence that wasn't the absence of sound, but rather the spacious awareness in which all sounds arose and faded. The trickling water didn't disturb this silence. The wind didn't break it. Even his own breathing seemed to rest within it, rather than interrupt it. For the first time in months, Kogan felt his shoulders drop. His breathing deepened without effort. The tight knot of anxiety in his chest began to soften and release. He sat in the garden for hours that night, not meditating in any formal sense, but simply resting in the discovery that silence was not something he needed to create. It was already there, always there, waiting patiently for him to notice. From that night forward, Kogan's practice transformed. When thoughts arose during meditation, he no longer fought them. Instead, he listened for the silence in which they appeared. When anxiety visited his mind, he welcomed it into the vast spaciousness he had discovered beneath the pine tree. His sleep became deep and natural, arising from the same trust in stillness that had found him in the moonlit garden. Years later, when students came to him with their own struggles to find peace, Kogan would take them to that same garden bench. "Listen," he would say simply, not to the sounds, but to what holds the sounds. Not to your thoughts, but to what observes the thinking. Rest there. Like Kogan, you can discover that the peace you seek is not something you must earn through perfect effort. It's not a reward for having the right thoughts or the most disciplined practice. Peace is your natural state, the ground of being that remains constant beneath all the activity of daily life. Right now, as you listen to these words, that same silence is available to you. You don't need to go to a mountain monastery or sit in a special garden. The spacious awareness that holds all experience is here with you now, closer than your next breath. Notice how your body naturally knows how to rest when you stop insisting that it stay alert. Notice how your breath deepens and slows when you're not trying to control it. This innate wisdom of relaxation is always available. You need only stop working against it. There was once a tea master renowned throughout his province for the perfect ceremonies he conducted. Students traveled from distant cities to learn from him, impressed by his graceful movements, his precise timing, his seemingly effortless mastery of every detail. One day, a visitor noticed that before each ceremony, the master would sit quietly with an empty teacup in his hands. He would hold it for several minutes, sometimes closing his eyes, sometimes gazing into its hollow interior. Curious, the visitor finally asked about this unusual practice. The master smiled and handed the visitor the empty cup. "What do you see?" he asked. "Nothing," the visitor replied. "It's empty." "Exactly," said the master. "And because it's empty, it can receive the tea. If it were already full, even with the most precious liquid, it could hold nothing new. Each day I sit with this empty cup to remember the great teaching it offers." "What teaching is that?" asked the visitor. "That emptiness is not lack, but capacity. That stillness is not absence, but potential. Before I can serve tea with presence and grace, I must first empty myself of the day's accumulations. The worries I've collected, the plans I've been carrying, the tensions I've gathered without noticing." The master paused, cradling the cup gently. "This empty vessel teaches me that rest is not earned through exhaustion, but discovered through letting go. When I empty myself like this cup, I can be filled with the peace that was always there, waiting." That night, the master's sleep was particularly deep. He had learned to approach rest the same way he approached the tea ceremony. First, the gentle emptying. Then, the receptive waiting. Finally, the natural filling with what was needed. You can practice this wisdom of the empty cup as you prepare for sleep. Notice what you've been carrying from the day. Not to judge these accumulated tensions, but simply to observe them with the gentle attention of the tea master. Perhaps you're holding worry about tomorrow's responsibilities. See if you can set this concern down for now, like placing a heavy bag beside your bed. It will be there in the morning if you need it, but it doesn't need to sleep with you. Maybe you're carrying replayed conversations, moments you wish had gone differently, words you wished you'd said or hadn't said. These too can be set aside. Like autumn leaves that naturally fall from the tree, yesterday's interactions can be released into the past where they belong. Your body may be holding the day's tensions as well. Your neck carrying the weight of concentration. Your shoulders bearing the load of responsibility. Your jaw clenched from careful attention to tasks and conversations. Each part can be invited to release its careful holding, to remember that this is the time for softening. Take a moment now to notice your breathing. not to change it, but simply to observe how it's doing its patient work without any effort from you. Your next inhale arrives without your planning or forcing. Your exhale releases without your control. This natural rhythm has been sustaining you all day, and it will carry you gently into sleep. With each breath, you can practice the wisdom of the empty cup. Breathing in, you receive whatever this moment offers. Breathing out, you release whatever is ready to go. Inhaling rest, exhaling effort. Inhaling peace, exhaling the day's accumulations. The breath knows how to slow itself as your body prepares for sleep. It knows how to deepen and soften without any guidance from your thinking mind. Trust this ancient wisdom that has carried every generation into rest. Your breath is an old friend that knows the way home. There's a beautiful practice in the Zen tradition called just sitting. It's remarkably simple, almost disappointingly so to those who expect spiritual practice to be complex and effortful. Just sitting means exactly what it sounds like. Sitting with what is, without trying to improve or change or fix anything. As you rest now, you can practice just lying. Lying with what is present. Lying with whatever sounds reach your ears from the world around you. Lying with whatever thoughts move through your mind like clouds across the sky. Lying with whatever sensations arise in your body as it settles into rest. This isn't passive resignation, but active receptivity. Like rich soil that doesn't force plants to grow, but provides the perfect conditions for growth to happen naturally. You're creating the conditions for sleep to arise organically from your willingness to be present with this moment. Notice how your thinking mind may want to solve problems or plan for tomorrow. This is its job during the day, and it performs this function beautifully when action is needed. But now is the time for a different kind of intelligence. The wisdom of the body that knows how to heal during sleep. The wisdom of the heart that processes the day's emotions in dreams. The wisdom of the spirit that connects to something larger than daily concerns. You can thank your thinking mind for its service today, like a faithful employee who has worked diligently and now deserves rest. Thank you for helping me navigate the day's challenges. You can rest now. Other kinds of wisdom will take care of what needs attention while you sleep. In ancient monasteries, the evening meditation was often called the Great Letting Go. Monks would sit in the gathering darkness, releasing not only the day's activities, but also the sense of being a separate someone who needed to manage and control life's unfolding. You can participate in this ancient practice from wherever you are, letting go not just of today's specific concerns, but of the more fundamental effort to be someone other than who you are. Releasing the project of improvement, the burden of becoming, the weight of trying to earn your worth through achievement or goodness. For these hours of sleep, you can rest from being anyone in particular. Rest from having problems to solve or goals to reach. Rest from the sometimes exhausting work of being a person moving through the world with purpose and direction. This doesn't mean becoming unconscious or absent. It means relaxing into the vast awareness that doesn't need to prove itself or accomplish anything to be complete. The awareness that was here before you had a name or a story and will remain when all the details of your personal life have been forgotten. Like a drop of water returning to the ocean, you can let your individual concerns dissolve into the boundless peace that holds all of life. Not losing yourself, but discovering the larger self that was never troubled by the day's ups and downs. The moon doesn't worry about tomorrow's schedule. The stars don't lose sleep over unfinished tasks. The mountain rests in profound stillness while weather patterns move across its face. You can join this ancient community of beings that know how to be present without effort, how to exist without struggling. Feel how your body naturally grows heavier as it prepares for sleep. This is not the heaviness of burden, but the weight of deep relaxation. Like a cat that settles completely into its chosen spot, holding nothing back, resisting nothing. Your body knows this wisdom of complete settling. Your breath continues its patient rhythm, requiring no attention from your conscious mind. Your heart beats steadily, pumping life through your body without your management. Countless processes of healing and restoration will begin the moment you fall asleep, guided by intelligence far older and wiser than any worry or plan. This is the great teaching that Kogan discovered in the moonlit garden. That peace is not the result of getting your life perfectly arranged or your mind completely quiet. Peace is the background against which all of life's activities arise and pass away. It's always here, always available, always waiting patiently for your return. Tonight, as you settle into sleep, you're not just resting your body and mind. You're participating in the fundamental rhythm of existence. The dance between activity and rest, engagement and release, doing and being that keeps the whole universe in balance. Rest well, knowing that this time of letting go serves not only your own restoration, but the healing of the world. When you wake tomorrow, you'll carry something of this peace back into your daily activities. Like a spring that's been allowed to refill, you'll have something genuine to offer from the overflow of your own well-being. For now, there's nothing to do but receive the gift of this moment. Nothing to accomplish but the sweet surrender to sleep's ancient call. Nothing to become but more fully yourself, rested and restored and ready for whatever tomorrow may bring. Let the silence that Kogan discovered in the garden hold you now. Let the emptiness of the tea master's cup create space for deep rest to fill you completely. Let your breath carry you gently toward the shore of sleep, where all the day's travelers eventually find their way home. Every mind is like a garden, tended by the constant activity of attention. Throughout the day, we plant seeds of thought, water them with our focus, and harvest the fruits of our mental cultivation. Some days the garden feels wild and overgrown. Other days it appears sparse and neglected. Tonight, we learn the art of tending this inner space with the wisdom of someone who knows that all gardens have their seasons. There lived in ancient China a man named Wei, who inherited a small plot of land on the outskirts of a busy trading town. The soil was poor, rocky, and seemed unsuitable for growing anything of value. Wei's neighbors used their better land for practical crops that would feed their families and provide income. They thought Wei foolish when he announced his intention to create a garden for beauty rather than profit. But Wei had a secret that his neighbors didn't know. For years, he had been troubled by an anxious mind that worried constantly about things beyond his control. His sleep was restless, disturbed by endless mental rehearsals of potential problems. His days were shadowed by a persistent unease that seemed to have no clear source. Traditional remedies and wise counselors had provided little relief. One morning, feeling particularly overwhelmed by his churning thoughts, Wei walked out to his rocky plot of land. As he stood there, surrounded by weeds and stones, a strange idea occurred to him. What if he treated his worries like seeds in a garden? What if, instead of fighting them or trying to eliminate them, he learned to tend them with the same patience a gardener brings to difficult soil? Wei began to visit his plot each morning, not to plant conventional crops, but to observe which worries had sprouted overnight in his mind. He would identify each concern, name it quietly to himself, and then imagine placing it in a specific section of his future garden. The worry about his aging parents went near the eastern edge, where the morning sun would touch it first. His anxiety about financial security found a place in the center, where he could keep a careful eye on it. His fear of being alone was planted near the western border, where it could receive the gentle light of evening. At first, this practice seemed to make little difference. The worries were still there, perhaps even more visible now that he was paying them such deliberate attention. But as weeks passed, Wei noticed something unexpected. By giving each worry a place in his mental garden, he was no longer surprised or overwhelmed when they appeared. They were simply part of the landscape he tended each morning. Gradually, Wei began to notice which worries were like perennial plants, returning each season with predictable reliability. His concern for his parents' health was one of these, rooted in love and naturally arising as they aged. Other worries were more like weeds, spreading quickly but having shallow roots. His anxiety about what neighbors thought of his garden, for instance, seemed to grow mainly when he wasn't paying attention to more important concerns. As months turned to years, Wei's inner garden began to transform. He learned that some worries, when given appropriate attention, actually bore useful fruit. His concern about finances motivated him to learn new skills and make wise decisions. His care for his parents deepened their relationship and helped him cherish their remaining time together. Even his fear of loneliness, when tended with compassion rather than resistance, opened his heart to friendships he might otherwise have missed. But perhaps most remarkably, Wei discovered that the simple act of tending his mental garden each morning brought a quality of peace he had never known before. Not because all the worries disappeared, but because he was no longer fighting against the nature of his mind. He had learned to work with its natural tendency to generate concerns, creating space for them while not allowing them to overtake the entire landscape. The physical garden that Wei created on his rocky plot became famous throughout the region. Visitors came from distant cities to see how he had transformed poor soil into a place of extraordinary beauty. But Wei knew that the outer garden was simply a reflection of the inner cultivation he had learned. The true teaching was in the patient tending of whatever arose in the soil of awareness, whether flowers or weeds, with equal care and attention. Years later, when troubled visitors sought his advice about their own anxious minds, Wei would take them to his garden at sunset. "See how this plot contains both flowers and weeds?" he would say. "The secret is not to eliminate what you consider undesirable, but to create harmony in the whole space. Some thoughts, like some plants, serve purposes we don't immediately understand. Our job is not to judge, but to tend with wisdom. Like Wei, you can bring this gardener's patience to the landscape of your mind as you prepare for sleep. Notice what has sprouted in your mental garden today. Perhaps there are worries about tomorrow's responsibilities, growing like eager seedlings reaching toward an uncertain future. Maybe there are regrets about today's interactions, lying like fallen leaves that need gentle composting into wisdom. You don't need to eliminate these mental plants to find peace. Instead, you can tend them with the same patient attention that Wei brought to his rocky soil. Give each concern its proper place. Notice which thoughts are perennial visitors that arise naturally from caring about your life. Observe which are more like weeds, spreading quickly but lacking deep roots in reality. This tending doesn't require effort or struggle. Like a gardener working in the cool of evening, you can move through your mental landscape with gentle attention. Acknowledging what's there, offering whatever care is needed, and then allowing the natural rhythms of rest to do their healing work. Your body, too, is part of this garden that benefits from gentle tending. Notice where physical tension has accumulated like tight buds that need to open. Your shoulders may be holding stress like a plant holding water during drought. Your jaw might be clenched like a flower closed against harsh sunlight. Each area of tension can be met with the same patient attention that Wei brought to his difficult soil. Breathe into these places of holding, not to force them to release, but to offer the nourishment of attention. Like sunlight and water reaching a plant, your gentle awareness can provide what these tense areas need to soften naturally. Your body knows how to let go when it feels safe and supported. There was a village called Shuimu, situated beside a lake so still that it perfectly reflected the surrounding mountains and sky. The villagers took great pride in their lake, considering it one of the natural wonders of their region. Visitors would come from far away just to witness the extraordinary clarity of its mirror-like surface. But Shuimu had not always been a peaceful place. In earlier times, the village had been troubled by constant conflicts. Neighbors quarreled over property boundaries. Merchants argued about fair prices. Families feuded over old grievances that no one could quite remember starting. The lake, they said, was choppy and unclear in those days, its surface too disturbed to reflect anything clearly. The transformation began with an old woman named Lin, who had grown tired of the village's endless discord. She was not a leader or person of obvious influence, just someone who had lived long enough to see the futility of trying to force peace through argument and persuasion. Instead, Lin began a simple practice that others noticed and gradually began to emulate. Each morning before dawn, Lin would walk to the edge of the lake and sit quietly on a large stone that jutted into the water. She would remain there as the sun rose, not praying or meditating in any formal sense, but simply resting her attention on the lake's surface. She watched how the slightest breeze would create ripples, how the movement of a fish would send circles spreading across the water, how gradually, as the air grew still, the surface would return to perfect clarity. At first, other villagers thought Lin was perhaps becoming senile, sitting by the lake talking to herself. But as they passed by on their way to morning tasks, some began to notice something unusual. The old woman wasn't talking at all. She was simply sitting in complete stillness, her attention so peaceful and steady that it seemed to influence the very air around her. Curious children began to join Lin some mornings, drawn by the unusual quality of silence she maintained. They would sit beside her on smaller stones, trying to imitate her peaceful posture. Without any instruction, they found themselves naturally drawn into the same restful observation. They watched how their own excited chatter would create ripples in the lake's surface, while their quiet attention allowed it to return to mirror-like clarity. As weeks passed, more villagers began to visit the lake during Lin's morning sitting. They came not for any particular teaching, but simply because the space around the old woman felt different from the rest of the village. Less hurried, less conflicted, more spacious. Sitting there, watching the lake's surface respond to the subtlest influences, they began to notice something similar happening in their own minds. Just as the lake would ripple when disturbed and clear when left alone, their thoughts would agitate when pushed and settle when given space. The same arguments that had seemed so important and urgent in the village began to feel less compelling in the presence of the lake's natural peace. Old grievances started to seem as insignificant as yesterday's weather patterns. Gradually, the village began to transform. Not through any dramatic interventions or imposed solutions, but through the quiet influence of people who had learned to tend their inner stillness, the way Lin tended her morning practice by the lake. Disputes still arose, but they were handled with less heat and more patience. Neighbors began to listen to each other more carefully, curious about perspectives different from their own. The lake itself seemed to respond to this shift in the village's atmosphere. Visitors remarked that its surface had become even more clear and reflective than in previous years. Some said this was merely coincidence, but the villagers knew better. They had learned that outer peace and inner peace were not separate phenomena, but aspects of the same fundamental harmony. Lin lived to be very old, continuing her morning practice by the lake until her final days. When she died, the villagers placed a small memorial stone beside her usual sitting spot. But they knew that her real legacy was not in any monument, but in the quality of attention she had cultivated and shared. The practice of beginning each day with stillness had become so woven into the life of Shuimu that visitors often remarked on the unusual peacefulness that seemed to permeate the entire village. Like the villagers of Shuimu, you can cultivate this quality of inner stillness that naturally influences everything around it. Your mind, like the lake, has its own capacity for clarity when not continuously disturbed by the winds of worry and the storms of agitation. Right now, as you rest in the gathering quiet of evening, you can practice Lin's simple wisdom. Allow your attention to settle like the lake's surface, returning to stillness. Notice how thoughts arise like ripples, spread for a moment across the surface of awareness, and then fade back into clarity. You don't need to stop thinking any more than Lin needed to stop the wind from occasionally stirring the lake. But you can learn to rest in the awareness that observes thinking, the spacious stillness that remains constant, whether thoughts are present or absent. Feel how your breathing naturally slows as you settle into this lake-like quality of mind. Each exhale is like a gentle breeze passing over water, stirring the surface briefly before allowing it to return to its natural clarity. Each inhale brings fresh stillness, like the early morning air that Lin breathed beside her beloved lake. Your body can participate in this settling as well. Like sediment that clouds water gradually sinking to the bottom, allowing the liquid above to become transparent, physical tension can be allowed to settle downward. The effort of the day, the holding patterns of concentration and care can sink into the earth beneath you, leaving your awareness clear and spacious. This is not a practice you need to master or perfect. Like tending a garden or sitting beside a lake, it's simply a way of being present with what is, allowing natural processes of settling and clearing to occur without interference. The wisdom is already there in your body's knowledge of how to rest, in your mind's capacity for stillness, in your heart's longing for peace. Wei the gardener discovered that fighting against his worries only strengthened them, while gentle attention allowed them to find their proper place in the landscape of his mind. Lin the lake-sitter learned that forcing stillness was impossible, but creating conditions for natural settling was always available. Tonight, you can apply both of these teachings as you prepare for sleep. Tend whatever arises in your mental garden with patient attention. Allow your inner lake to settle into the clarity that is its natural state. Neither fighting nor forcing, but simply creating space for the peace that is always waiting beneath the surface activity of daily life. The garden of your inner world doesn't need to be perfect to be peaceful. It simply needs to be tended with care. The lake of your awareness doesn't need to be permanently still to be clear. It simply needs to be allowed its natural settling. These ancient wisdoms work together, supporting your body and mind in their deep need for restoration and rest. As you continue to settle into sleep, carry with you the patience of the gardener and the stillness of the lake. Trust that the night will do its own perfect work of tending and clearing, composting the day's experiences into tomorrow's wisdom, washing clean the mirror of awareness for whatever tomorrow may bring. From the stillness of the lake, we now turn toward the wisdom of flowing water. Like a river that knows exactly how to navigate around obstacles without effort or planning, you too can learn the art of moving gracefully through life's changes. Tonight, as you prepare to surrender to sleep's gentle current, we explore the profound teachings that flowing water offers about letting go. Rivers never struggle against their banks. They don't fight the stones in their path or resist the pull of gravity that draws them toward the sea. Water teaches us that the most powerful force often appears the most gentle, yielding to every obstacle while eventually wearing down the hardest stone through patience and persistence. Your journey towards sleep can follow this same natural wisdom. Rather than forcing relaxation or struggling against wakefulness, you can allow rest to arrive as naturally as a river reaches the ocean. The current is already there, flowing beneath your conscious effort. You need only stop swimming against it. In the mountains of ancient Tibet, there lived a ferryman named Tenzin who operated the only crossing over a deep river valley. For 40 years, he carried travelers across the rushing waters that separated the valley's two sides. His small wooden boat and steady hands were the lifeline for villagers, traders, pilgrims, and wanderers who needed safe passage. Tenzin worked mostly during daylight hours, when the crossing was safest and the demand highest. But occasionally, urgent travelers would arrive after sunset, desperate to reach the other side. Against the advice of other villagers who considered night crossings far too dangerous, Tenzin would agree to these twilight journeys. What the villagers didn't understand was that Tenzin had discovered something remarkable about night crossings. In the darkness, when he couldn't see the river's surface clearly, he had learned to feel the water's movement in an entirely different way. Without the distraction of visual landmarks and the illusion of control they provided, he could sense the current's true direction through the gentle rocking of his boat. During daylight crossings, Tenzin would carefully navigate around visible obstacles, choosing what appeared to be the safest route. But these routes often proved difficult, requiring constant correction and adjustment as the river revealed surprises hidden beneath its surface. The harder he tried to control the crossing, the more challenging it became. In the darkness, however, Tenzin learned to trust the river itself to guide their passage. He would push off from shore and then allow the current to show him the way. His boat would drift slightly downstream, following channels he couldn't see but could feel through the subtle movements of the water. These night journeys, which had initially terrified him, became the most peaceful and efficient crossings of all. One evening, a young merchant arrived just as the sun was setting, frantic with worry about reaching his destination. His goods were perishable, his customers waiting, his livelihood dependent on crossing that night. Tenzin agreed to take him, despite the man's obvious anxiety about traveling in darkness. As they pushed off from shore, the merchant gripped the sides of the boat tightly, his body rigid with fear. "How can you possibly navigate safely when you can't see where we're going?" he demanded. Tenzin smiled and gestured toward the water around them. "Watch," he said simply. Instead of rowing frantically against the current or trying to maintain a straight line across the river, he allowed the boat to drift with the water's natural flow. He used his oars not to fight the current, but to make small adjustments that worked with the river's own movement. During the day, Tenzin explained as they glided smoothly across the dark water, I think I can see where I should go. I plan my route based on what appears to be the best path. But the river has its own wisdom about the safest crossing, and this wisdom is clearer when I stop trying to impose my own plan. The merchant gradually relaxed his grip as he felt how smoothly they were moving. But how do you know we're going in the right direction? The river knows, Tenzin replied. It has been flowing from this mountain to the sea for thousands of years. It knows every stone on the bottom, every shift in the current, every safe passage. When I stop fighting against its knowledge and instead listen to what it's telling me through the movement of the boat, we arrive exactly where we need to be. As they reached the far shore, the merchant was amazed at how effortless the crossing had felt. I've never experienced anything like that, he said. It was almost like the river was carrying us. It was, Tenzin confirmed. The river carries everything that doesn't resist its flow. Fish don't struggle to swim downstream. Leaves don't fight to float on the surface. Only humans exhaust ourselves trying to go against the natural current. Years later, when Tenzin became too old to ferry passengers, he would sit by the river in the evenings and share his wisdom with anyone who would listen. Life is like crossing this river, he would say. We think we need to see clearly and plan carefully to move safely through it. But often the most graceful progress happens when we learn to feel our way, trusting the natural flow of circumstances to guide us. What about during difficult times? Visitors would ask. What about when life feels dangerous or uncertain? Tenzin would point to the dark water flowing past them. The river is most honest at night. During the day, the sunlight on the surface can create illusions, making shallow water look deep or deep water look shallow. In darkness, you must rely on true feeling rather than misleading appearances. Life's difficult times are like night crossings. They strip away our illusions of control and teach us to trust deeper wisdom. Like Tenzin, you can learn to navigate towards sleep by trusting the natural current rather than fighting against it. Right now, your body's wisdom is already creating the conditions for rest. Your breath is gradually slowing. Your muscles are beginning to release their daily tension. Your mind is starting to drift away from the sharp focus that served you during waking hours. This is the river of sleep beginning to carry you. You don't need to see exactly where it's taking you or understand every aspect of the journey. You simply need to stop resisting the natural flow that's already in motion. Notice how your thinking becomes softer at this time of day. Thoughts move more slowly, like objects floating on a gentle current rather than being pushed rapidly downstream. This is not a failure of mental clarity, but a natural shift toward the kind of consciousness that supports rest and restoration. Your worries about tomorrow don't need to be resolved before you can sleep. Like logs that will float downstream to where they're needed, your concerns can be entrusted to the night's own process of sorting and organizing. Sleep has its own intelligence for placing things in proper perspective. Feel how your body naturally grows heavier as you surrender to rest. This heaviness is not burden, but the pleasant weight of a body that's finally allowing itself to be supported. Like a traveler settling into Tenzin's boat, trusting the ferryman's knowledge of safe passage, you can trust your body's ancient knowledge of how to cross from waking into sleep. There was once a stream that flowed from high mountain peaks down through forests and meadows toward the distant sea. For most of its journey, the stream moved easily, following the natural contours of the landscape, bubbling cheerfully over stones, pooling briefly in quiet eddies before continuing its downward flow. But one day, the stream encountered a massive boulder that had fallen across its path during a rock slide. The stone was far too large to flow around, too solid to wear away quickly, and seemed to block completely the route the stream had followed for countless years. At first, the stream tried to force its way through the tiny gaps on either side of the boulder. It gathered its force and rushed against the stone with all the pressure it could muster. But the boulder remained unmoved, and the stream only exhausted itself in the effort. The water began to back up behind the obstacle, creating a small lake where there had been free flow. For days, the stream struggled against this unexpected blockage, growing increasingly frustrated with its inability to continue along its familiar path. It had always moved so easily before, flowing naturally from high places to low, following the path of least resistance. Now it seemed stuck, trapped by circumstances beyond its control. But gradually, something interesting began to happen. As the water backed up behind the boulder, it started to explore other possibilities. Small rivulets began to form, finding tiny channels around the edges of the stone. These new paths were different from the stream's original route, sometimes moving in unexpected directions, creating small waterfalls and pools that hadn't existed before. The stream discovered that by spreading out and exploring multiple new channels, it could eventually flow around the boulder without needing to move it or break through it. The obstacle that had seemed like a complete blockage became the catalyst for creating an even more beautiful and diverse water garden. In time, the area around the boulder became famous as one of the most lovely spots in the entire mountain region. The stream had learned to work with the obstruction rather than against it, creating something more interesting than its original straight path would have been. Other streams, hearing about this creative solution, began to understand a fundamental truth about the nature of water. Resistance and struggle weren't necessary when encountering obstacles. Patient exploration and willingness to find new routes could transform apparent problems into unexpected opportunities. The original stream continued its journey to the sea, but it carried with it the wisdom learned from that encounter with the boulder. When later obstacles appeared, smaller stones and fallen logs, the stream met them with curiosity rather than resistance. It had learned that adaptation was not defeat, but a more sophisticated form of flow. Years later, when young streams would complain about obstacles in their paths, this wise stream would share its story. "The boulder taught me that there's always a way forward," it would say. "Sometimes it's not the way you planned or expected, but water always finds its path to the sea. The secret is not to fight what can't be moved, but to explore what can be discovered." Like the stream, you may encounter obstacles as you move towards sleep. Perhaps your mind presents boulder-like worries that seem to block the path to rest. Maybe physical discomfort creates apparent barriers to relaxation. These obstructions don't need to be removed before you can find your way to peaceful sleep. Instead, you can practice the stream's wisdom of patient exploration. Allow your attention to flow around the edges of worry, finding small channels of peace that exist alongside your concerns. Discover pools of comfort within your body, even when some areas remain tense or uncomfortable. The path to sleep doesn't require the complete absence of thoughts or the perfect relaxation of every muscle. Like water finding multiple channels around an obstacle, your awareness can discover rest in unexpected places. A few deep breaths can create their own current toward peace. The weight of your head on the pillow can anchor you in present moment comfort. The sound of your heartbeat can become a rhythm that carries you downstream towards sleep. This practice of flowing around obstacles is especially valuable when dealing with the persistent thoughts that sometimes arise at bedtime. Instead of struggling to stop thinking completely, you can allow thoughts to be present while your attention explores other aspects of the moment. The softness of your breathing, the warmth beneath your covers, the gentle darkness that surrounds you. Like the stream that learned to work with the boulder instead of against it, you can work with your mind's natural activity instead of fighting it. Thoughts can flow through your awareness like water moving around stones, present but not blocking your progress toward rest. Your body, too, knows this wisdom of adaptive flow. When you release the effort to make every part of yourself perfectly comfortable, you often discover that comfort arises naturally in unexpected ways. The gentle settling of your spine into the mattress, the easy rhythm of your breathing, the pleasant heaviness of your limbs as they remember how to rest. There's a beautiful teaching in the Zen tradition about the nature of impermanence. This too shall pass, the masters would remind their students when facing difficult circumstances. But they would also say the same thing during pleasant experiences. This too shall pass. Not as a warning or disappointment, but as a fundamental truth that can bring great comfort. Everything that causes you worry tonight will pass. The urgent tasks waiting for tomorrow will be completed or resolved in their proper time. The difficult emotions you may be carrying will transform and eventually release. The physical sensations of tension or discomfort will shift and change as your body moves through its natural cycles. But this teaching of impermanence offers another gift as well. Just as everything difficult passes away, everything that supports your peace and well-being is also constantly flowing into your experience. New moments of rest arrive with each breath. Fresh opportunities for relaxation emerge as your body settles. Different currents of peace become available as your mind's activity naturally slows. You don't need to hold on to any particular feeling of peace or comfort for it to serve you. Like the flowing stream, your experience of rest can move and change while still carrying you steadily toward the sea of deep sleep. Each moment of peace, however brief, contributes to the overall current that's drawing you away from the busy shores of daily life. This understanding of flow can transform how you relate to the entire process of falling asleep. 5. Instead of treating sleep as a destination you must reach through effort, you can experience it as a current you're already riding. Instead of working to achieve unconsciousness, you can rest in the awareness that's naturally becoming softer and more spacious. The ferryman Tenzin discovered that night crossings required a different kind of navigation than daylight journeys. The transition from waking to sleeping also requires its own special wisdom. During the day, your mind works by focusing, analyzing, planning, and controlling. But the approach to sleep calls for the opposite skills: softening, accepting, allowing, and trusting. This shift from doing to being doesn't happen all at once, like flipping a switch. It occurs gradually, like a river slowly changing direction as it follows the natural contours of the land. You can participate in this shift by gently releasing your grip on the day's way of being and allowing the night's different rhythm to guide you. Feel how your breath naturally wants to slow and deepen as you rest. This is the current of sleep beginning to influence your entire system. Your nervous system is shifting from its daytime state of alert readiness to its nighttime mode of restoration and repair. Countless processes of healing and integration will begin the moment you allow this transition to complete itself. You don't need to understand these processes or manage them any more than the stream needs to understand the mountain or manage the flow of gravity. 5. The wisdom is built into the system itself. Your job is simply to stop working against the natural current that's already carrying you toward rest. Tonight, as you continue to settle into sleep, carry with you the teachings of flowing water. Trust the river of your own natural rhythms to guide you safely across from the shores of waking into the peaceful depths of sleep. Allow obstacles to become opportunities for discovering new currents of peace. Remember that everything passes, including the effort and holding that are ready now to be released into the flowing stream of rest. From the flowing wisdom of rivers, we now ascend to the profound stillness of high places. Like a mountain that remains unshaken while storms pass over its peaks and seasons change across its slopes, you too can discover the unmoving peace that lies at the heart of all experience. Tonight, we explore the deep rest that comes not from the absence of activity, but from connection to something so stable and enduring that all of life's changes become like weather patterns moving across a vast and patient landscape. Mountains teach us about a different kind of strength than we usually imagine. Not the strength that pushes against obstacles or forces outcomes, but the strength that's simply island. A mountain doesn't struggle to remain upright. It doesn't work to maintain its position. Its power comes from its complete settledness, its absolute rest in its own nature. As you prepare for sleep, you can discover this same quality of being within yourself. Beneath all the day's activities and concerns, beneath even your thoughts and emotions, there exists something unshakable. Not because it's hard or rigid, but because it's so fundamentally at rest that nothing can disturb it. High in the Himalayas, where the air grows thin and the world below fades into blue distance, there lived a hermit named Norbu who had chosen the most remote peak he could find for his meditation retreat. He had come to the mountain seeking the perfect silence that he believed was necessary for deep spiritual practice. In the valley below, life was too busy, too full of distractions that pulled his attention away from meditation. For the first months of his retreat, Norbu felt he had found exactly what he was looking for. The mountain peak was so isolated that he could sometimes go weeks without seeing another human being. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional call of a high-altitude bird or the distant sound of wind moving through stone passages. But as seasons passed, Norbu began to notice something unexpected. The mountain was not actually silent at all. During the day, thermal currents created almost constant air movement. At night, the rock itself would make subtle settling sounds as it cooled. Snow and ice would shift and crack with changes in temperature. Weather patterns moving across the peaks created their own complex symphony of sounds. At first, these discoveries frustrated Norbu. He had climbed to this remote place specifically to escape noise and distraction. Now he was finding that even at the roof of the world, complete external silence was impossible. His meditation practice, which he had hoped would become effortless in perfect quiet, remained as challenging as ever. One winter evening, during a particularly fierce storm that had trapped Norbu in his small stone shelter for 3 days, he reached a moment of complete discouragement. The wind was howling around the peaks with extraordinary force. Ice pellets struck his shelter walls with sounds like thrown pebbles. The storm was so loud that he couldn't even hear his own breathing. But in that moment of giving up his search for external silence, something remarkable happened. Norbu suddenly noticed that there was a quality of stillness present that had nothing to do with the absence of sound. Even while the storm raged around him, even while his shelter shook with the force of the wind, there was something absolutely unmoved at the center of his experience. It wasn't that the storm became quieter. If anything, it grew more intense as the night progressed. But Nobu realized that he had been looking for silence in the wrong place. The peace he sought wasn't in his environment, but in the awareness that was observing the environment. The storm could rage as powerfully as it wanted without disturbing the spacious stillness in which all sounds arose and faded. From that night forward, Nobu's practice transformed completely. Instead of trying to create perfect external conditions for meditation, he learned to rest in the unchanging awareness that remained constant whether his surroundings were quiet or noisy, calm or chaotic. He discovered that this inner stability was actually more reliable than any external situation, which could change without warning. When spring arrived and other pilgrims began to visit Nobu's mountain retreat, they were amazed by the quality of peace that surrounded him. They expected someone who had spent years in isolation to be either completely serene or perhaps a bit strange from too much solitude. Instead, they found a man who seemed completely at ease regardless of what was happening around him. "Master," one visitor asked, "how did you achieve such perfect tranquility? Is it because you've been living in this place of ultimate silence?" Nobu laughed and gestured toward the peaks around them, where wind was creating its usual complex music among the rocks. "Listen," he said. "Do you hear silence?" The visitor listened carefully and had to admit that he heard many sounds: wind, distant rockfall, the calls of birds, even the sound of his own breathing and heartbeat. "Then where is the peace you're experiencing right now?" Nobu asked. The visitor paused, suddenly noticing that despite all the sounds around them, there was indeed a quality of profound stillness present. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "I can hear all these sounds, but somehow there's also silence." "That's the mountain's real teaching," Nobu explained. "True silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the space in which all sounds appear. True stillness isn't the absence of movement. It's the awareness in which all activity takes place. The mountain doesn't need to stop the wind to remain unshaken. You don't need to stop your thoughts to find peace." Years later, when Nobu eventually descended from his mountain retreat, people were surprised by how easily he adapted to life in busy valleys and crowded towns. They expected someone who had lived in such isolation to be overwhelmed by the noise and activity of normal human society. Instead, Nobu moved through the busiest marketplaces with the same unshakable calm he had cultivated on his remote peak. "The mountain taught me that peace doesn't depend on location," he would explain to those who asked about his transition. "It depends on recognizing the unchanging awareness that's always present, whether you're on a mountain peak or in a crowded street. Once you find that inner stability, you can rest anywhere. Like Nobu, you can discover this mountain-like quality within yourself. Not through changing your external circumstances, but by recognizing the awareness that remains constant through all circumstances. Right now, as you rest in preparation for sleep, this unshakable stillness is available to you. Notice that even as thoughts move through your mind, there's something that observes the thinking without being disturbed by it. Even as your body goes through its natural processes of settling and adjusting, there's an awareness that witnesses these changes without being changed by them. This observing presence is like the mountain itself, stable and unmoved, regardless of what weather patterns pass across its surface. Your breathing can become a bridge to this mountain-like stability. Each inhale and exhale happens within a spacious stillness that's neither breathing in nor breathing out. Feel how your breath rises and falls within this larger awareness, like wind moving across mountain peaks without disturbing the fundamental solidity of the stone beneath. Physical sensations, too, can be met with this quality of mountain-like presence. Areas of tension or discomfort in your body are like temporary weather systems moving across the landscape of your physical experience. They arise, change, and eventually pass away, but they don't disturb the basic awareness that's observing them. This doesn't mean ignoring discomfort or pretending it doesn't exist. Mountains don't pretend that storms aren't happening. They simply remain stable and present while weather moves through their environment. You can bring this same quality of steady presence to whatever physical sensations are present as you settle into rest. There was once a great statue of the Buddha, carved from a single enormous piece of stone and placed in a garden where it could overlook a peaceful valley. The statue had been crafted by a master sculptor who spent years perfecting every detail, from the serene expression on the Buddha's face to the graceful folds of his robes. Pilgrims would travel from distant lands just to sit in the presence of this beautiful representation of perfect peace. The statue stood in its garden for many decades, through all kinds of weather and changing seasons. Rain would wash over its surface, snow would accumulate on its shoulders, and summer sun would warm the stone. Children would play around its base, birds would nest in the carved folds of its robes, and countless visitors would come and go, each finding their own meaning in its peaceful presence. But over the years, something interesting began to happen. A young monk who tended the garden started to notice that different people seemed to see different things in the statue's expression. Some visitors spoke of the profound sadness they perceived in the Buddha's face, saying it reflected their own grief and loss. Others saw infinite compassion, feeling that the statue understood their struggles with patience and love. Still, others described a joy so complete that it seemed to transform their own capacity for happiness. The monk was puzzled by these varied interpretations. The statue itself never changed, carved as it was from unchanging stone. Its expression remained exactly the same day after day, year after year. Yet each person who spent time with it seemed to discover something different, often something that perfectly matched what they needed to see in that moment. One day, a very old teacher visited the garden and sat for a long time in contemplation before the statue. The young monk approached him and asked about this mystery. "Master, how can this statue show different expressions to different people when it's made of solid stone that never changes?" The old teacher smiled and looked carefully at the statue for several moments before responding. "Watch the statue's face throughout the day," he suggested. "Notice how it appears different as the light changes, as shadows move across it, as weather creates different atmospheres around it. The stone itself doesn't change, but our perception of it shifts with conditions." The monk followed this advice and was amazed by what he discovered. In the soft light of dawn, the Buddha's face seemed to glow with gentle awakening. During the bright hours of midday, it appeared alert and fully present. As afternoon light slanted across the garden, the expression looked contemplative and wise. At sunset, there was warmth and compassion in the features. Under moonlight, the face seemed to hold infinite mystery and peace. "Now you're beginning to understand," the old teacher said when the monk shared these observations. "The statue teaches us about the nature of true stability. It doesn't maintain the same appearance by forcing itself to look identical in all conditions. It remains essentially unchanged while allowing itself to be seen differently as circumstances shift around it." The teacher paused, allowing this teaching to settle. "This is the Buddha's gift to us," Not a rigid sameness that fights against the natural changes of life, but a deep stability that can accommodate all conditions without being disturbed by them. The stone Buddha shows us what enlightened consciousness looks like, completely at rest in its own nature while remaining open to the full range of experience. From that day forward, the young monk approached his own meditation practice differently. Instead of trying to maintain the same mental state all the time, he learned to rest in the awareness that could be present with whatever arose. Like the stone Buddha, he discovered a stability that didn't depend on keeping everything the same, but on finding the unchanging ground of being that was always available beneath changing circumstances. You can practice this same wisdom as you prepare for sleep. Instead of trying to force your mind into a particular state of calm, you can rest in the awareness that's naturally present, whether your thoughts are active or quiet. Like the Buddha statue that remained essentially unchanged while appearing different in various lights, you can find the aspect of yourself that remains stable while your experience of the moment shifts and changes. This is especially helpful when dealing with the mental activity that sometimes arises at bedtime. Thoughts about tomorrow's responsibilities, memories from today's interactions, or random mental chatter can all be met with the same steady presence that the stone Buddha brought to changing weather. These mental phenomena are like different lighting conditions moving across the unchanging awareness that observes them. Your body, too, can embody this Buddha-like stability. Feel how your physical form can rest like a mountain or a statue, heavy and settled, while sensations move through it like weather patterns. The beating of your heart, the flow of your breath, the subtle adjustments your body makes as it settles, all of these can happen within a larger stillness that remains undisturbed. This quality of unshakable rest doesn't require effort to maintain. Like gravity or the stone's natural hardness, it's simply the nature of awareness itself when it's not working to be anything other than what it island. The stability you're looking for is not something you need to create, but something you can recognize and rest into. There's a beautiful teaching in Buddhism about what are called the unshakable deliverances of mind. These are qualities of consciousness that, once recognized, provide a stability that doesn't depend on external conditions. Like a mountain that remains solid whether storms are raging or clear skies prevail, these inner qualities offer refuge regardless of what's happening in the changing circumstances of life. One of these unshakable qualities is the simple recognition that awareness itself is always present. Whatever else may be happening, thoughts coming and going, emotions rising and falling, sensations changing throughout the body, the knowing of these experiences remains constant. This knowing doesn't get happy when pleasant things arise or sad when difficult things appear. It simply remains present, spacious, and available. Another unshakable quality is the understanding that all experiences are temporary. Just as weather patterns move across mountain peaks without permanently altering the stone, all of your thoughts and feelings and bodily sensations move through awareness without fundamentally changing its nature. This understanding brings a deep relaxation because you know that whatever discomfort you might be experiencing now will eventually shift and change. A third unshakable deliverance is the recognition of your fundamental okayness. Beneath all your personal stories about success and failure, all your concerns about whether you're good enough or doing enough, there's a basic wellness that doesn't depend on having your life perfectly arranged. Like a mountain that doesn't need to justify its existence or prove its worth, you can rest in the simple fact of your being here, now, exactly as you are. These teachings aren't philosophical concepts to think about, but direct recognitions that become available as you settle into the moment. Right now, You can notice the awareness that's reading these words, the knowing presence that's been with you throughout your entire life. This awareness has never been damaged by any experience you've had. It has never been improved by any achievement or diminished by any failure. Feel how this recognition brings a natural settling, like finding solid ground after walking on uncertain terrain. Your body can relax more completely when it knows it's supported by something unshakable. Your breath can deepen when it's resting in awareness that doesn't need to be protected or maintained through effort. This mountain-like stability makes falling asleep not a loss of consciousness, but a deepening into rest. Sleep becomes not an escape from awareness, but awareness settling into its most natural and restorative state. Like a mountain that remains present through day and night, the essential you continues through all states of consciousness, providing a thread of continuity that makes rest feel safe and natural. As you continue settling into sleep tonight, carry with you the teachings of the mountain hermit and the stone Buddha. Remember that the peace you seek doesn't depend on having perfect conditions, but on recognizing the unshakable awareness that's always available. Let your body rest like a mountain, solid and unmovable. Let your mind rest like the sky around mountain peaks, spacious enough to hold all weather without being disturbed. The deep rest that awaits you is not empty unconsciousness, but the profound sleep of awareness returning to its source. Like a mountain that knows no separation between day and night, sleeping and waking, you can rest in the continuity of being that flows seamlessly through all states of experience. Sleep now in the confidence of this mountain-like stability, surrounded by the unshakable peace that has always been your deepest nature. Many people fear the darkness, both the literal darkness of night and the metaphorical darkness of not knowing what tomorrow will bring. But ancient wisdom traditions have long recognized that darkness is not the opposite of light, but rather the spacious void from which all light emerges. The darkness that enfolds you now as you settle towards sleep is not empty, but pregnant with possibility, rich with the potential for healing and renewal that can only happen when conscious effort finally releases its careful hold. In the mountains of old Japan, there lived a monk named Getsu, who had developed an unusual practice that puzzled his fellow monastery residents. While others would retire to their cells after evening meditation and remain there until the morning bell, Getsu would slip quietly out of the monastery late at night and spend hours walking the mountain paths under whatever moon or stars were visible. At first, the other monks worried about Getsu's nighttime wanderings. The mountain trails were treacherous enough in daylight, with steep drops and loose rocks that could easily cause a fall. At night, these dangers were multiplied, and several senior monks warned Getsu that his practice was unnecessarily risky. But Getsu had discovered something during his night walks that he couldn't find during daylight meditation. In the darkness, his other senses became remarkably acute. He could hear the subtle sounds of the mountain's nighttime life with extraordinary clarity. The distant call of an owl, the soft footsteps of deer moving through undergrowth, the gentle trickling of streams that were barely audible during the day's louder activity. More importantly, Getsu found that walking in darkness required a different kind of attention than any practice he had tried before. During daylight meditation, his mind would often wander into planning or remembering, distracted by visual details in his environment. But night walking demanded constant presence. Each step required careful attention to the ground beneath his feet, to the subtle signs that indicated whether the path was safe or dangerous. This quality of attention gradually began to transform Getsu's entire approach to practice. During his night walks, he wasn't trying to achieve any particular state of mind or work, through specific spiritual problems. He was simply present with the immediate reality of each moment, feeling his way forward with a kind of intimate trust that daylight had never required. One particularly dark night, when clouds covered both moon and stars, Getsu found himself on a section of the mountain trail that he didn't recognize. The path seemed to have split in two directions, and in the complete darkness, he couldn't tell which route was safe. He stood still for several minutes, listening carefully for any clues about which direction to take. As he waited in the darkness, something remarkable happened. Instead of feeling lost or anxious about not knowing which way to go, Getsu began to experience a profound sense of being exactly where he needed to be. The not knowing, which would have felt frightening during the day, became a doorway into a different kind of awareness. Standing there in complete darkness, unable to see his own hand in front of his face, Getsu realized that he had been living most of his life as if he could see clearly where he was going. He made plans, set goals, tried to control outcomes based on what appeared to be obvious choices. But in this moment of complete visual darkness, he understood that most of life actually required the same kind of intimate attention that he was practicing on this invisible mountain path. As he stood quietly in the darkness, Getsu's other senses began to provide the guidance he needed. A slight breeze carried the scent of pine trees, indicating which direction led deeper into the forest. The sound of a distant stream suggested which path would eventually lead back toward the monastery. Most importantly, he could feel through his feet which direction offered more stable ground. By the time the first light of dawn began to illuminate the mountain peaks, Getsu had found his way safely back to the monastery. But more than that, he had discovered a new relationship with uncertainty that would transform his spiritual practice for the rest of his life. From that night forward, Getsu approached all aspects of his life with the same quality of intimate attention that darkness had taught him. When facing decisions, instead of relying only on mental analysis, he would listen for the subtle signs that his whole being was offering. When meditation became difficult, instead of forcing his mind to behave in particular ways, he would feel his way forward moment by moment, trusting the process to reveal what was needed. Years later, when students would ask Getsu about his unusual practice of night walking, he would take them outside under the evening sky. "Look at the stars," he would say. "You can only see them clearly when it's dark enough." Some truths can only be discovered when we stop trying to illuminate everything with the harsh light of mental effort. But isn't darkness dangerous? Students would ask. Shouldn't we try to see clearly where we're going? Getsu would smile and point to the moon, which might be visible as a thin crescent or completely hidden behind clouds. The moon doesn't create its own light, he would explain. It simply reflects the sun's illumination in a form that's gentle enough for night vision. When we try too hard to see everything clearly, we create a glare that actually blinds us to subtler guidance that's always available. Darkness teaches us to trust senses other than sight, he would continue. It teaches us to feel our way forward with patience and care. Most importantly, it teaches us that we don't need to see the entire path to take the next step safely. Like Getsu, you can learn to trust the darkness that surrounds you as you settle into sleep. The not knowing where sleep will take you, the letting go of control that unconsciousness requires, the releasing of the day's efforts to manage and direct your experience, all of these can become doorways into a deeper trust rather than sources of anxiety. Notice how your vision naturally softens as you prepare for rest. This isn't a loss of capacity, but a shift toward a different kind of perception. Just as Getsu discovered that night vision revealed things that daylight obscured, the gentle dimming of conscious awareness as you approach sleep opens doorways to other forms of wisdom. Your body knows how to navigate toward rest without visual guidance. Feel how it naturally finds the most comfortable position, how it knows exactly where to release tension, how it can sense what it needs for restoration. This embodied intelligence doesn't require the bright light of mental analysis. It works more like Getsu's night walking, feeling its way forward through subtle signs and intimate attention. The darkness that enfolds you now is not empty space, but a rich environment full of healing potential. Just as the night sky reveals stars that are invisible during daylight hours, the darkness of approaching sleep makes visible inner resources for restoration that remain hidden during the busy activity of waking consciousness. In the old Chinese capital of Chang'an, there stood a famous Buddhist temple known throughout the empire for its beautiful evening ceremonies. Pilgrims would travel for months just to participate in the temple's sunset meditation, when hundreds of monks would gather in the main hall to practice together as daylight faded into night. But the temple was most renowned for a particular practice that happened at midnight, when a single bell would ring once across the sleeping city. This midnight bell was different from the regular bells that marked the hours or called monks to prayer. It was larger, deeper, and cast from a special bronze alloy that allowed its sound to carry for miles across the valley. The story of the midnight bell began with the temple's founding master, a monk named Mingjiao, who had noticed something beautiful about the deepest hours of night. During his own late-night meditation practice, he observed that there was a quality of silence present at midnight that was different from any other time of day. Not just the absence of human activity, but a profound stillness that seemed to emerge from the earth itself. Mingjiao began to experiment with ringing a bell during these midnight hours, curious about how sound would behave in such deep silence. He discovered that the bell's tone seemed to carry further and last longer when rung in the middle of the night than at any other time. More importantly, the sound seemed to reach something deeper in listeners, touching a place that was rarely accessible during the noise and activity of daylight hours. Word of the midnight bell began to spread throughout the city. People reported that they would wake at the sound, not startled or disturbed, but gently called into a moment of extraordinary peace. Many said that hearing the bell in the depth of night brought them a sense of connection to something larger than their individual concerns, a reminder that they were part of a vast community of beings sharing the same moment of time. But the most remarkable stories came from those who were already awake during the midnight hour, people caring for sick family members, guards keeping watch, travelers unable to sleep in unfamiliar places. These night dwellers reported that the bell's sound seemed to transform their experience of being awake in darkness from something lonely or frightening into something sacred and connected. One such person was a merchant named Li Wei, who suffered from persistent insomnia that had troubled him for years. Night after night, he would lie awake worried about his business, his family's welfare, the endless responsibilities that seemed to multiply in the darkness. The sleepless hours felt like punishment, empty time that served no purpose except to exhaust him for the following day. But on his first night staying at an inn near the temple, Li Wei's experience of sleeplessness was completely transformed by the midnight bell. When its deep tone rang across the city, something in his chest relaxed that he hadn't even realized was tense. The worries that had been circling in his mind suddenly seemed less urgent, held within a larger perspective that the bell's sound somehow conveyed. Li Wei began to time his travels so that he could stay near the temple whenever possible. On nights when sleep eluded him, instead of fighting against wakefulness or feeling frustrated by his inability to rest, he would lie quietly and listen for the midnight bell. When it rang, he would allow its sound to fill him completely, feeling how it connected him to all the other sleepless people throughout the city and beyond. Over time, Li Wei's relationship with insomnia transformed completely. Sleepless nights were no longer sources of distress, but opportunities for a different kind of rest. Even when he couldn't fall asleep, he could rest in the deep silence that the midnight bell revealed, finding restoration not through unconsciousness, but through connection to the vast stillness that held all of life's activity. Years later, when Li Wei established his own home in a distant city, he would lie awake on difficult nights and listen inwardly for the memory of that midnight bell. Even when he couldn't hear it physically, he could recall the quality of peace it had revealed, the reminder that darkness was not empty, but full of supportive presence. The midnight bell continued to ring for decades, marking the deepest point of night for countless people throughout the region. But the bell's real gift was not the sound itself, but what it revealed about the nature of darkness and silence. It showed that the night hours were not empty time to be endured, but sacred space where different kinds of awareness could emerge. Like the people who were touched by the midnight bell, you can discover that the darkness surrounding sleep is not vacant emptiness, but a rich environment of restoration and renewal. The quiet hours are not dead time, but alive with subtle processes of healing that can only happen when the busy activity of conscious control finally steps aside. Right now, as you rest in the growing darkness, you can listen for your own inner midnight bell. Not an external sound, but the deep resonance of peace that emerges when you stop working so hard to manage your experience. This inner bell rings not to wake you up, but to call you home to the profound rest that's available in each moment of surrender. Feel how the darkness around you is not threatening, but embracing, not empty, but full of supportive presence. Like the silence that allowed the midnight bell to carry so clearly across the valley, the quieting of your mental activity creates space for deeper kinds of knowing to emerge. Your breath can become like that temple bell, marking the rhythm of your descent into rest. Each exhale releases a little more of the day's effort and holding. Each inhale draws you deeper into the healing darkness that knows exactly how to restore what has been depleted and renew what has been worn. The transition from waking to sleeping is like moving from the busy daylight world into the sacred space of the midnight temple. Different rules apply here. Different kinds of wisdom become available. The harsh light of analytical thinking gives way to the gentle illumination of intuitive knowing. There's a beautiful practice in contemplative traditions called resting in unknowing. Instead of trying to figure everything out or plan every detail of tomorrow, you can practice the art of being comfortable with not knowing what comes next. This doesn't mean being careless or unprepared, but rather trusting that life has its own intelligence for unfolding appropriately. Sleep is perhaps the most natural practice of resting in unknowing that we have. Each night, you surrender conscious control and trust your body and mind to do whatever restoration is needed while you're unconscious. You don't stay awake to supervise the process of cellular repair, memory consolidation, or dream processing. You simply trust these ancient wisdom systems to function without your management. This same quality of trust can transform your approach to falling asleep. Instead of working to make sleep happen, you can practice the art of allowing sleep to receive you. Like stepping into a warm bath or settling into a comfortable chair, you can let the natural process of rest support you completely. The darkness that Getsu learned to navigate on his mountain paths is the same darkness that now surrounds your approach to sleep. It's not the absence of guidance, but the presence of a different kind of wisdom that doesn't rely on seeing everything clearly in advance. It's the wisdom of feeling your way forward moment by moment, trusting your deepest intelligence to know what's needed. Your body knows how to sleep the same way it knows how to digest food or heal cuts. You don't need to understand these processes intellectually or control them consciously. You simply need to create the conditions that allow them to function naturally. Relaxing into darkness is creating one of those essential conditions. Notice how your thinking naturally becomes softer and more dreamlike as you settle towards sleep. This isn't a failure of mental clarity, but a shift toward the kind of consciousness that's most supportive of rest and renewal. Like moonlight that's gentler than sunlight but still provides enough illumination to navigate safely, this softer awareness is perfectly suited for the journey into sleep. The sounds around you, whether they're quiet or more noticeable, can become like the midnight bell that blessed the ancient Chinese city. Instead of disturbing your rest, they can serve as reminders of the vast community of life that surrounds and supports you. Every sound is evidence that you're not alone in the darkness, but part of an intricate web of existence that continues its patient work of living and breathing and being throughout the night hours. Even the beating of your own heart can become a kind of midnight bell, marking time not in minutes and hours, but in the sacred rhythm of life itself. Feel how this steady pulse has been with you since before your birth and will continue until your final breath. It's a sound more reliable than any external bell, a reminder that you're supported by life forces much older and wiser than your conscious worries. Tonight, as you continue settling into the darkness of approaching sleep, carry with you the wisdom of the night-walking monk and the peace of the midnight bell. Trust that the darkness is not empty but full, not threatening but embracing. Allow your eyes to close like flowers closing at sunset, not from exhaustion, but from the natural rhythm that honors both activity and rest. The moonlight of deep peace is already illuminating your inner landscape, revealing pathways to restoration that remain hidden during the bright activity of daytime consciousness. Follow these gentle paths with the same trust that Getsu brought to his mountain trails, knowing that each step takes you closer to the profound rest that awaits in the heart of darkness. Sleep is perhaps the most mysterious teacher we encounter. Every night, without any conscious effort or understanding on our part, our minds and bodies engage in complex processes of repair, renewal, and reorganization. Memories are sorted and integrated. Emotions are processed and balanced. Physical systems are restored to optimal function. All of this happens while our waking consciousness steps aside, trusting processes far older and wiser than any plan or intention we might consciously create. In ancient Tibet, high in a monastery that seemed to touch the clouds themselves, there lived a master named Tenzin Norbu who had developed an unusual method of teaching his students. Unlike other teachers who relied primarily on daytime lectures, meditation instructions, and formal discussions of Buddhist philosophy, Master Norbu conducted much of his most profound teaching through what he called dream dharma, wisdom that was transmitted during the students' sleeping hours. At first, newcomers to the monastery were puzzled by this approach. They had come expecting intensive meditation schedules, rigorous study of sacred texts, and challenging intellectual discussions about the nature of reality. Instead, Master Norbu would often spend only a few minutes each evening offering simple instructions before sending everyone to sleep with the suggestion that their real learning would happen in dreams. Your waking mind, the master would explain, is like a gatekeeper who thinks he knows what's safe to allow inside and what should be kept out. He means well, but he's often too cautious, rejecting wisdom that doesn't fit his familiar categories. When you sleep, this gatekeeper steps aside, and deeper truths can enter without resistance. One student, a young man named Lobsang, who had spent years studying Buddhist philosophy at other monasteries, was particularly skeptical of this dream teaching approach. He had worked hard to develop his intellectual understanding of spiritual concepts and was eager to continue that kind of rigorous mental training. The suggestion that important learning could happen while he was unconscious seemed like superstition to his scholarly mind. For weeks, Lobsang would lie in his cell at night feeling frustrated and confused. He remembered very few of his dreams, and those he did recall seemed like random nonsense rather than profound spiritual instruction. Meanwhile, other students would wake in the morning speaking excitedly about insights they had received, problems that had been solved, and deep understanding that had emerged during their sleeping hours. One evening, Master Norbu called Lobsang aside after the day's final meditation. "You're working too hard," the master observed gently. "You approach sleep the same way you approach study, trying to achieve something, trying to control the outcome. But dreams are not examinations you can pass through effort. They're gifts that come only when the mind is truly at rest." "But how can I learn anything if I'm unconscious?" Lobsang asked. "How can wisdom be transmitted when I'm not even aware of receiving it?" Master Norbu smiled and pointed to a flowering tree visible through the window of his teaching room. "Look at that tree," he said. "Do you think it works hard to grow? Does it study treatises on how to produce blossoms? Does it analyze the process of photosynthesis?" Lobsang had to admit that the tree seemed to grow effortlessly, following some natural intelligence that required no conscious effort. "Your sleeping mind is like that tree," the master explained. "It knows how to grow in wisdom without your waking mind needing to supervise the process. But just as the tree needs the right conditions, good soil, adequate water, proper sunlight, your dreaming consciousness needs the right conditions to receive teaching. The primary condition is genuine rest, not the restless half-sleep of a mind that's still trying to control and achieve." That night, Lobsang approached sleep differently. Instead of trying to program himself to receive teachings or remember dreams, he simply focused on creating the deepest rest possible. He released his expectations, his desire to understand, even his wish to be a good student. He allowed his mind to settle like sediment in water, becoming clear and still. In the dream that came, Lobsang found himself walking through a vast library where all the books were blank. At first, this seemed like a nightmare for someone who loved learning through reading. But as he moved through the empty shelves, he began to feel a profound peace. The absence of external information allowed him to notice a different kind of knowing that was arising from within. Understanding that didn't come from books or teachers, but from a source deeper than intellectual learning. When Lobsang woke, he couldn't remember the specific details of the dream, but something fundamental had shifted in his understanding. He felt a confidence in his own inner wisdom that had never been there before. The questions that had been troubling him about spiritual practice seemed less urgent, not because they had been answered intellectually, but because he had accessed a way of knowing that transcended the need for mental solutions. From that night forward, Lobsang's entire approach to learning transformed. He continued his daytime studies and meditation practice, but he no longer tried to force understanding through mental effort alone. He learned to work with his conscious mind during the day and then trust his unconscious wisdom to continue the integration process during sleep. Years later, when Lobsang became a teacher himself, students would ask him to explain the doctrine of emptiness or the nature of Buddha consciousness. Instead of launching into intellectual explanations, he would often say, "Practice sincerely during the day, then sleep deeply, and let the teaching continue in dreams." Some truths can only be understood when the thinking mind stops working so hard. Master Norbu lived to be very old, and his monastery became famous throughout Tibet for producing students who seemed to possess an unusually deep and stable understanding of spiritual principles. When other teachers asked about his methods, he would simply say, "I teach half the time. Sleep teaches the other half. My job is to plant seeds. Sleep's job is to help them grow into wisdom." Like Lobsang, you can learn to trust the profound intelligence that becomes available when conscious effort steps aside. Right now, as you settle into sleep, countless processes of healing and integration are preparing to begin their work. You don't need to understand these processes or supervise them any more than you need to consciously direct the beating of your heart or the flow of your breath. Your mind knows how to sort through the day's experiences, keeping what's useful and releasing what's no longer needed. Your emotions know how to process and balance themselves during sleep, often resolving conflicts and tensions that seemed overwhelming during waking hours. Your body knows how to repair, restore, and renew itself while you rest, engaging in complex work of cellular maintenance that would be impossible to manage consciously. This automatic wisdom that operates during sleep is not separate from your deepest spiritual nature. It's one of the most accessible examples of how life organizes itself intelligently without requiring conscious control or understanding. Trusting sleep is practicing trust in the fundamental intelligence that animates all of existence. Feel how your body is already beginning to prepare for this transition into unconscious wisdom. Your breathing is naturally slowing and deepening. Your muscles are releasing their careful holding. Your thoughts are becoming softer and more dreamlike. All of these changes are happening without your effort, guided by systems that know exactly what you need for restoration. There was once a Chinese philosopher named Jangzi who lived over 2,000 years ago and became famous for his profound insights into the nature of reality. Many of his deepest teachings came through stories and parables that pointed to truths too subtle for direct explanation. Perhaps his most famous teaching came through a dream that revealed something extraordinary about the relationship between dreaming and waking consciousness. One afternoon, Jangzi fell asleep in his garden and had a vivid dream in which he was a butterfly. In the dream, he flew from flower to flower, completely absorbed in the simple joy of being a beautiful winged creature. He felt the sun on his delicate wings, tasted nectar from various blossoms, and experienced the pure freedom of movement through the warm air. The dream was so real and complete that while he was dreaming, Jangzi had no memory of being a human philosopher. He was simply and completely a butterfly, living fully in the butterfly's world. When Jangzi woke from this dream, he was initially delighted by how vivid and joyful the experience had been. But as he sat in his garden reflecting on what he had experienced, a puzzling question began to emerge. How could he be certain that he was really Jangzi, who had dreamed of being a butterfly? What if the truth was actually the reverse? That he was really a butterfly who was now dreaming of being a human philosopher named Jangzi? This question wasn't merely philosophical speculation for Jangzi. It opened up a profound inquiry into the nature of identity and reality. During the dream, his experience of being a butterfly had felt completely real and authentic. His current experience of being human felt equally real and authentic. So what made one experience more true than the other? As Jangzi contemplated this puzzle over the following days, he began to realize that the question itself revealed something important about the nature of consciousness. Perhaps the distinction between real waking experience and unreal dream experience was not as clear as most people assumed. Perhaps both states were different manifestations of the same fundamental awareness, like waves on the ocean that appear different but are all made of the same water. This insight led Jangzi to a deeper understanding of what he called the transformation of things. Instead of seeing waking and sleeping, dreaming and being awake as opposite states, he began to experience them as part of a continuous flow of consciousness that took different forms but never actually stopped being itself. From this perspective, sleep was not a temporary death or absence of consciousness, but consciousness taking on a different form, like water becoming ice or steam while remaining essentially water. Dreams were not inferior copies of waking experience, but alternative ways that awareness could know itself and explore different possibilities of being. This understanding transformed Jangzi's relationship to sleep and dreams. Instead of seeing sleep as dead time that interrupted his waking life, he experienced it as another room in the vast house of consciousness. Instead of dismissing dreams as meaningless fantasies, he paid attention to them as legitimate forms of experience that could offer their own kinds of wisdom. Years later, when students would ask Jangzi about the butterfly dream, he would smile and say, "I am never sure whether I am Jangzi dreaming of being a butterfly or a butterfly dreaming of being Jangzi. But I am certain that both experiences are real expressions of the one consciousness that transforms itself endlessly into new forms." This teaching became known as Jangzi's butterfly, and it has inspired contemplatives for over 2 millennia to question their assumptions about the relationship between waking and sleeping consciousness. The butterfly story suggests that dreams are not inferior versions of waking experience, but equal expressions of consciousness exploring different dimensions of reality. Like Jangzi, you can approach the transition into sleep not as leaving consciousness behind, but as consciousness preparing to explore a different landscape. The awareness that observes your waking experience doesn't disappear when you fall asleep. It shifts into a different mode, like an explorer moving from one continent to another, encountering new territories and possibilities. This perspective can transform how you experience falling asleep. Instead of losing consciousness, you're allowing consciousness to take on a new form. Instead of becoming absent, you're becoming present to different dimensions of experience. The you that dreams is the same you that's reading these words now, simply exploring reality from a different vantage point. Your dreams tonight will be legitimate experiences worthy of the same respect you give to waking activities. The insights that emerge during sleep, the problems that get solved, the emotional processing that occurs, all of this is real work being done by real intelligence, just in a different mode than daytime consciousness. Modern sleep research has confirmed much of what contemplatives like Master Nobu and Jangzi understood intuitively. During sleep, the brain engages in complex processes of memory consolidation, emotional regulation, and problem-solving that are impossible during waking hours. The unconscious mind can make connections and find solutions that elude conscious analysis, often presenting them in dreams or making them available upon waking. But this scientific understanding, valuable as it is, points to something even more profound that ancient wisdom traditions recognized. Sleep is not just a biological necessity, but a doorway into aspects of intelligence that transcend individual thinking. It's a nightly return to the source of consciousness itself, where individual awareness reconnects with the larger intelligence that orchestrates all of life's processes. When you trust sleep to do its healing work, you're not just trusting your personal unconscious mind. You're trusting the same intelligence that guides the growth of plants, the migration of birds, the healing of wounds, and the countless other processes that sustain life on Earth. Sleep connects you to this vast network of natural intelligence, allowing it to work through your individual system for restoration and renewal. Feel how your body is already responding to this deeper intelligence as you settle towards sleep. Your temperature is beginning to lower, creating optimal conditions for rest. Your heart rate is slowing to its nighttime rhythm. Hormones that support healing and growth are being released into your system. All of this is happening automatically, guided by wisdom that predates human consciousness by millions of years. Your mind, too, is preparing for its nightly journey into unconscious wisdom. The sharp focus that served you during the day is naturally softening into a more receptive state. Thoughts are becoming more fluid and dreamlike. The rigid boundaries between different aspects of experience are beginning to dissolve, creating space for new connections and insights to emerge. This is not a breakdown of mental function, but a shift into a different kind of mental activity that's perfectly suited for the work of integration and renewal. Just as soil needs to be loose and dark for seeds to sprout, consciousness needs to become soft and receptive for deep healing to occur. The stories and teachings you've encountered tonight, the monk's discovery of silence, the gardener's wisdom, the ferryman's trust, the mountain's stability, the darkness's embrace, all of these seeds of understanding will continue to grow during your sleep. You don't need to think about them or work to understand them more fully. Like plants growing in rich soil, they will develop according to their own natural timing and wisdom. Trust that your dreaming mind knows how to nurture these teachings, how to integrate them with your own experience, how to help them blossom into practical wisdom that will serve you in daily life. The insights that matter most often arise not through intellectual effort, but through the kind of gentle integration that happens when consciousness is allowed to rest and renew itself. As you continue settling into sleep, remember that you're not leaving awareness behind, but allowing it to explore new territories. You're not becoming absent, but becoming present to different dimensions of experience. The butterfly of your consciousness is preparing to take flight into the vast garden of dreams, where every flower offers its own nectar of wisdom and every breeze carries messages from the deeper intelligence that guides all of life's unfolding. Sleep now in the confidence that this nightly journey into unconscious wisdom will bring exactly what you need for restoration and renewal. Trust the ancient intelligence that has guided countless generations into rest, knowing that the same caring awareness that brought you safely through today will carry you gently through the healing darkness and return you to tomorrow renewed and restored. The butterfly awaits, ready to carry your consciousness into new gardens of experience where the deepest teachings bloom in the gentle darkness of sleep. Many people imagine that spiritual awakening must be dramatic, like lightning illuminating a dark sky in one brilliant flash. But the ancient masters knew that the most lasting transformations usually happen like dawn breaking, so gradually that you don't notice the exact moment when darkness becomes light. The gentlest touch often penetrates deepest, and the softest voice can be heard most clearly when the mind has learned to listen. As you prepare for sleep, you're practicing this same art of gentle awakening, awakening to rest, awakening to trust, awakening to the profound intelligence that knows how to restore and renew without any effort from your conscious mind. This nightly practice of surrender is teaching you the very skills that lead to the deepest kinds of spiritual opening: patience, trust, and the willingness to let transformation happen in its own perfect timing. In the bamboo forests of ancient Korea, there lived a young monk named Sunim who had become frustrated with what he perceived as his slow progress in meditation practice. He had been sitting regularly for several years, following all the traditional instructions with diligent effort. Yet he felt no closer to the profound awakening that the ancient texts described than when he had first begun. Sunim would sit on his meditation cushion each morning and evening, watching his breath, observing his thoughts, trying to cultivate the states of concentration and insight that his teachers discussed. But instead of growing peace, he often experienced more agitation. Instead of clarity, his mind seemed more confused than ever. Instead of the blissful absorption he had read about, he felt restless and dissatisfied. One particularly difficult morning, after a meditation session filled with wandering thoughts and physical discomfort, Sunim decided to walk through the bamboo forest that surrounded his small temple. He hoped that movement and fresh air might clear his mind and restore some sense of progress in his practice. As he walked slowly along the forest path, Sunim noticed something remarkable about the bamboo trees that he had never observed before. These graceful plants, which could grow to enormous heights and develop incredible strength, grew so slowly that their daily progress was completely invisible. Day by day, there seemed to be no change at all. Yet over months and years, they transformed from tiny shoots into towering groves that could bend in the strongest winds without breaking. Intrigued by this observation, Sunim began to visit the forest regularly, choosing one particular bamboo shoot to watch over time. Each day, the plant looked exactly the same as the day before. Each week, he could detect no obvious difference. But when he compared the plant's height to markers he had placed months earlier, the growth was undeniable. The bamboo was transforming continuously, but in increments so small that they required patience and faith to perceive. As he observed the bamboo's growth over seasons, Sunim began to understand something profound about the nature of all real transformation. The most fundamental changes happen not through dramatic breakthroughs, but through countless tiny shifts that were individually imperceptible but cumulatively extraordinary. The bamboo didn't strain or struggle to grow. It simply maintained the conditions that supported growth and trusted the process to unfold in its own perfect timing. One morning, while sitting quietly beside his chosen bamboo plant, Sunim realized that his own practice had been following a similar pattern. When he looked back over his years of meditation, he could see changes that had been invisible from day to day. His reactions to difficult emotions had become less intense. His ability to remain present during challenging circumstances had quietly strengthened. His overall sense of peace, while still imperfect, was deeper than it had been when he started. The problem was not that transformation wasn't happening. The problem was that he had been looking for it in the wrong way, expecting dramatic shifts rather than noticing the gentle, continuous evolution that was actually occurring. Like trying to watch the bamboo grow by staring at it hour by hour, his impatience had blinded him to the real progress that was unfolding. From that day forward, Sunim approached his practice with what he came to call bamboo patience. Instead of measuring his meditation sessions by whether he achieved particular states or insights, he simply maintained the conditions that supported growth: regular sitting, gentle attention, and trust in the process. Instead of forcing breakthroughs, he learned to appreciate the tiny shifts that happen naturally when consciousness was given space to evolve in its own timing. Years later, when other young monks would come to Sunim expressing frustration with their seemingly slow progress, he would take them to the bamboo forest. Choose a plant, he would suggest, and visit it regularly for a year. Let it teach you about the way all real transformation happens. But we want to understand enlightenment, not plant growth, they would protest. Sunim would smile and point to the towering bamboo around them. These trees understand something about awakening that most humans miss. They know that the gentlest approach, sustained over time, leads to the greatest strength. They know that forcing growth actually prevents it. They know that trust in natural timing is more powerful than impatience. The same intelligence that guides bamboo growth, he would continue, is guiding your awakening. Your job is not to make it happen faster, but to create optimal conditions and then get out of the way. Practice regularly, but gently. Pay attention, but without strain. Trust the process even when you can't see daily progress. Like Sunim, you can learn to appreciate the bamboo-like growth that's happening in your own consciousness as you practice the art of falling asleep. Each night of rest is contributing to changes that are too subtle to measure from day to day, but profound over time. Your nervous system is learning to settle more easily. Your mind is developing greater comfort with uncertainty. Your body is becoming more skilled at releasing the day's tensions. This gradual development of sleep skills is similar to any other form of learning. Just as a musician doesn't expect to master a complex piece in a single practice session, you don't need to achieve perfect sleep immediately. Each night of gentle effort contributes to your growing capacity for rest, even when individual nights feel difficult or unsatisfying. Right now, as you continue settling towards sleep, you can practice Sunim's bamboo patience. Instead of measuring this moment by whether you're falling asleep quickly enough, you can appreciate the conditions you're creating that support natural rest. The softening of your breathing, the releasing of physical tension, the gradual quieting of mental activity. These changes are happening whether you notice them or not, guided by the same natural intelligence that grows bamboo and heals wounds and regulates countless body functions without your conscious involvement. Your job is simply to maintain supportive conditions and trust the process to unfold in its own perfect timing. Feel how your body naturally knows the rhythm of this gradual settling. Like bamboo that doesn't strain to grow, but simply opens to the conditions that support growth, your physical form knows how to open to the conditions that support rest. Darkness, quiet, horizontal position, released effort, all of these create the environment where sleep can emerge naturally. Your mind, too, can follow this bamboo-like approach to rest. Instead of forcing thoughts to stop, you can create mental conditions that naturally support quieting. Gentle attention to breathing. Soft focus on physical sensations. Patient acceptance of whatever mental activity arises without getting caught in struggling against it. There was once a master gardener in ancient Japan who became famous throughout the country for her extraordinary ability to cultivate morning glories. These delicate flowering vines were notoriously difficult to grow, requiring precise conditions and careful timing to bloom properly. Many gardeners would struggle for years without ever seeing a single flower, giving up in frustration when their efforts failed to produce results. But Keiko, the master gardener, had developed an approach that seemed almost magical in its effectiveness. Visitors would come from distant provinces to learn her secrets, expecting to discover some special technique or hidden knowledge that would guarantee success with these challenging plants. To their surprise, Keiko's methods appeared remarkably simple, almost disappointingly so. She would plant the seeds in ordinary soil, water them regularly but not excessively, and then... Wait. She didn't use special fertilizers or complicated growing techniques. She didn't monitor the plants constantly or adjust conditions obsessively. She simply provided basic care and then trusted the seeds to do what seeds naturally know how to do. But how do you know they're going to bloom? Visitors would ask, looking at the unremarkable green vines that showed no obvious signs of impending flowers. I don't know, Keiko would reply honestly. But I trust. I've learned that morning glories have their own timing for blooming, and it's not my timing. My job is to provide good conditions and then get out of the way. When I try to force flowers to appear by overwatering or over-fertilizing or constantly checking for buds, I actually prevent blooming. But some of your vines never bloom at all, they would point out. Doesn't that mean your method fails sometimes? Keiko would nod calmly. Yes, some vines never flower. But I've noticed that the ones I worry about least tend to bloom most beautifully. The ones I fuss over and try to control usually struggle the most. There's something about anxious attention that interferes with natural processes. As summer progressed and Keiko's morning glories began to bloom in spectacular profusion, visitors would finally understand what she meant. The flowers that opened were more vibrant and lasted longer than any they had seen in gardens where the plants had been more intensively managed. The gentle, trusting approach had produced results that forced efforts could never achieve. But Keiko's deepest teaching became apparent early in the morning when she would walk through her garden just as the first light was appearing. Morning glories open their petals in response to dawn, but not all at once. Some flowers would be just beginning to unfold, their tight spirals slowly loosening. Others would be halfway open, revealing glimpses of the colors within. Still others would be fully opened, displaying their complete beauty to the morning sky. This is how all real opening happens. Keiko would explain to the few visitors who were willing to wake early enough to witness this daily miracle. Not all at once, but in waves, in perfect timing that can't be rushed or forced. Each flower opens when it's ready, according to its own nature and the conditions around it. The same is true for human consciousness, she would continue. We want everything to open all at once, all our wisdom, all our peace, all our capacity for love. But consciousness unfolds like these flowers, in layers, in response to the right conditions, in timing that we can't control but can learn to trust. Years later, when Keiko became too old to maintain her extensive gardens, she continued to grow a small patch of morning glories outside her window. Students would visit her there, hoping to learn the secret of her success. Her final teaching was the simplest of all: create good conditions, then rest in not knowing. Awakening happens the same way flowers bloom and babies are born and bamboo grows, through a mysterious process that works best when we don't interfere. Our job is to show up consistently with love and attention, then get out of the way and let life do what life knows how to do. Like Keiko's morning glories, your consciousness is opening in its own perfect timing, layer by layer, season by season. The settling into sleep that you're experiencing right now is one expression of this natural unfolding. Just as flowers open in response to dawn light, your awareness knows how to open to rest in response to the gathering darkness and the invitation to release conscious control. You don't need to force this opening any more than Keiko needed to pull her morning glory buds apart to make them bloom faster. You simply need to create supportive conditions, relaxed body, quiet mind, trusting heart, and then allow the natural process of rest to unfold in its own way and timing. Notice how this understanding brings a quality of gentleness to your approach to sleep. There's no need to achieve anything or perform correctly. There's no timeline you must meet or standard you must reach. There's simply the invitation to create good conditions and then rest in the not knowing of what will unfold. Feel how your breathing naturally deepens when you stop trying to control it and instead trust its ancient wisdom. Notice how your muscles release more completely when you stop checking to see if they're relaxed enough and instead allow them to follow their own natural rhythm of settling. Observe how your thoughts become softer when you stop working to quiet them and instead create space for whatever mental activity wants to arise. This gentle, trusting approach to rest is also a practice in the art of gentle awakening. Every time you release effort and trust natural processes, you're developing the same skills that support spiritual opening. Every time you create supportive conditions and then step back to allow transformation to happen in its own timing, you're cultivating the patience and faith that characterize all genuine growth. The bamboo patience that Sunim learned in the forest, the trusting cultivation that Keiko practiced in her garden, these same qualities can guide your journey into sleep. Not forcing, but allowing. Not grasping, but receiving. Not controlling, but trusting the ancient intelligence that knows exactly how to restore and renew your body, mind, and spirit during the hours of rest. As you continue settling into sleep, carry with you this understanding of gentle awakening. Know that every moment of rest is contributing to your ongoing transformation, even when you can't perceive the changes directly. Trust that the same wisdom that grows bamboo and opens flowers is guiding your own unfolding toward greater peace, deeper wisdom, and more natural ease with life's constant changes. The morning glories of your consciousness will open when they're ready, in perfect response to the conditions you're creating right now through this practice of gentle surrender. Rest in the confidence that all awakening, whether it's awakening to deeper truth or awakening refreshed from sleep, happens through the same patient, trusting process that gardeners and contemplatives have relied upon for countless generations. Sleep now in this spirit of gentle unfolding, knowing that the night's rest will bring exactly what's needed for your continued growth and awakening in timing that's wiser than any plan you could devise and more caring than any effort you could make. As you settle into the deepest layers of rest, you can feel yourself approaching this same threshold. The gentle efforts you've been making to relax, to breathe mindfully, to release the day's holdings, all of these are beginning to happen by themselves, without your supervision or management. You are discovering the space where doing transforms into being, where trying dissolves into trusting, where your individual will align so completely with the flow of life that there is no longer any sense of separation between your intention and what naturally wants to unfold. In a monastery hidden deep in the forests of ancient Burma, there lived a meditation master named Thant who had spent 40 years developing the most refined and sophisticated spiritual practices. He was renowned throughout the region for his ability to enter extremely deep states of concentration, his mastery of complex visualization techniques, and his encyclopedic knowledge of meditation methods from various traditions. Students would travel from distant countries to learn from Thant, hoping to acquire even a fraction of his impressive spiritual skills. The master would teach them intricate breathing techniques, elaborate mindfulness exercises, and detailed instructions for cultivating specific mental states. His students made remarkable progress under his guidance, developing abilities that other teachers considered quite advanced. But despite his outward success and the respect he commanded, Thant harbored a secret doubt that grew stronger with each passing year. While he could demonstrate all the classical signs of spiritual attainment, while he could guide students to experiences they found profoundly meaningful, he himself felt somehow removed from the simple, natural peace that he had glimpsed in his very earliest days of practice. The harder Thant worked to perfect his meditation, the more complex his techniques became, and the further he seemed to drift from the effortless joy that had originally drawn him to spiritual life. He had become so skilled at doing meditation that he had forgotten how to simply be. His practice had become so refined that it required constant maintenance and adjustment, leaving little space for the spontaneous arising of natural wisdom. One evening, feeling particularly burdened by the weight of his accumulated spiritual achievements, Thant decided to take a walk in the forest surrounding his monastery. He had no particular destination in mind, no meditation technique to practice, no spiritual goal to accomplish. He simply walked because walking felt better than sitting in his meditation hall, surrounded by the evidence of his sophisticated but somehow unsatisfying practice. As he wandered deeper into the forest, Thant came upon a small clearing where an old man sat beside a tiny campfire. The stranger appeared to be a simple woodcutter, his clothes worn and practical, his face weathered by years of outdoor work. There was nothing obviously spiritual about him, no signs of special knowledge or attainment. Yet something in his presence made Thant pause and ask if he might sit beside the fire for a few minutes. The old man gestured warmly toward a fallen log, and Thant settled himself across the fire from this unexpected encounter. They sat in comfortable silence for some time, the old man occasionally tending his fire with movements so natural and unself-conscious that they seemed like extensions of the forest's own rhythms. "You look like a man who carries a heavy load," the woodcutter eventually observed, his voice gentle but direct. Thant was surprised by this comment. "What do you mean?" "I'm not carrying anything physical." The old man smiled and pointed to Thant's shoulders, which the meditation master suddenly realized were tense and elevated despite his years of practicing relaxation techniques. "Perhaps not physical," the woodcutter said, "but you're carrying something that's wearing you down. I've seen that particular kind of tiredness before." Despite himself, Thant found himself opening up to this simple stranger, describing his decades of spiritual practice, his mastery of complex techniques, and his growing sense that all his accomplishments were somehow missing the essential point. As he spoke, he realized how much effort he was putting into maintaining his identity as an advanced practitioner, how exhausting it had become to live up to his own standards of spiritual achievement. The woodcutter listened with the kind of complete attention that Thant usually associated with the deepest meditation states, yet the old man seemed to be making no effort at all to be present. His attention was as natural as a tree's attention to sunlight, as effortless as water's attention to flowing downhill. "Tell me," the woodcutter said when Thant had finished describing his spiritual dilemma, "when you first began practicing meditation, before you learned all these sophisticated techniques, what was it like?" Thant thought back to his earliest days as a young monk, when meditation had been simple and fresh. It was easy, he admitted. I would just sit and breathe, and peace would come naturally. I didn't know enough to make it complicated. And you think you know more now than you did then?" The old man asked, stirring the fire with a stick. "Well, yes," Thant replied. "I've studied with masters, learned advanced techniques, developed abilities I never had as a beginner." The woodcutter nodded thoughtfully. "I've been cutting wood for 50 years, he said. "When I started, I would struggle with each tree, using all my force and determination. I thought skill meant working harder and developing more sophisticated cutting techniques. 5. But you know what I discovered?" Thant shook his head. "The trees wanted to fall. My job was not to make them fall through superior technique, but to find the natural point where they were ready to let go. Now, when I cut wood, I barely feel like I'm doing anything. The axe knows where to go, the tree knows when to release, and I just participate." As the old man spoke, something began to shift in Thant's understanding. He realized that he had been treating spiritual practice like a project to complete rather than a natural unfolding to participate in. He had been trying to force enlightenment through perfect technique rather than recognizing the awareness that was already present and needed only to be noticed and trusted. That night, Thant returned to his monastery and did something he hadn't done in decades. Instead of engaging in any formal meditation practice, he simply sat in his usual spot and remembered what it was like to be a complete beginner. He dropped all his sophisticated techniques, released all his spiritual achievements, and allowed himself to rest in the same simple presence he had known as a young monk. To his amazement, the natural peace that had been obscured by years of effortful practice immediately began to emerge. Not because he was doing anything right, but because he had finally stopped doing so much. The awareness he had been trying to cultivate through complex methods revealed itself to be the very awareness that was observing all his methods. From that night forward, Thant's teaching style completely transformed. Instead of offering students elaborate techniques, he would simply sit with them in the same effortless presence he had rediscovered. Instead of teaching them how to achieve special states, he would help them recognize the ordinary awareness that was already available. His monastery became known not for producing students with impressive meditation abilities, but for the quality of natural peace that seemed to permeate everything. Years later, when advanced practitioners would visit Thant, hoping to learn his most sophisticated teachings, he would smile and point to the forest where he had met the old woodcutter. "The deepest teaching," he would say, "is that there's nothing to learn that you don't already know, nothing to achieve that you don't already have, nothing to become that you're not already. The practice is not to add something to your experience, but to stop covering up what's naturally present." Like Thant, you may discover that the deepest rest comes not from perfecting techniques of relaxation, but from recognizing the relaxation that is always available when you stop working so hard to achieve it. Right now, as you settle towards sleep, you can practice this same art of releasing even the effort to practice. Notice how your breathing settles into its natural rhythm when you stop trying to breathe in any particular way. Feel how your body finds its optimal position for rest when you stop adjusting and arranging. 5. Observe how your mind naturally quiets when you stop managing your thoughts and simply allow whatever mental activity is present to be there without resistance or encouragement. This is the space between effort and grace that Thant discovered by the woodcutter's fire. It's not that effort is wrong or unnecessary. Your sincere engagement with rest has created the conditions for this effortless settling to emerge. But now, having done your part, you can step back and allow sleep to do its part, trusting the natural intelligence that knows exactly how to carry you from waking into rest. Feel how this understanding brings an even deeper quality of letting go. You don't need to maintain any particular state of mind or continue any specific practice. You can simply rest in the awareness that has been present throughout all your efforts, the same awareness that will remain present throughout your sleep. In the high mountains of Kashmir, there was once a small ashram where a very unusual teaching method was employed. Instead of offering students complex spiritual practices or detailed philosophical instructions, the master who lived there had developed what he called the practice of non-practice. Students who arrived expecting intensive meditation schedules or rigorous disciplines would find themselves gently invited to do nothing in particular. The master, known simply as Baba, would welcome new students warmly and then suggest they spend their first few days simply resting and observing life in the ashram. No special techniques were taught, no particular behaviors were required, no spiritual goals were set. Students were free to sleep when tired, eat when hungry, walk when moved to walk, and sit when inclined to sit. Many students initially found this approach frustrating. They had come seeking spiritual advancement and instead found themselves encouraged to follow their most natural impulses. Some left after a few days, convinced that nothing important was happening in such an unstructured environment. But those who stayed began to notice something remarkable. Without the pressure to achieve spiritual states or master particular practices, their minds naturally began to settle. Without goals to reach or progress to measure, they found themselves becoming present in a way that forced meditation had never accomplished. Without techniques to maintain, they discovered a quality of awareness that required no maintenance. One student, a woman named Priya, who had spent years learning elaborate visualization practices at other ashrams, was particularly puzzled by Baba's non-method. "Master," she asked one morning, "how can we develop spiritually without practices? How can we purify the mind without techniques? How can we achieve realization without effort?" Baba gestured toward a nearby stream that flowed naturally down the mountainside. "Does the water practice flowing?" he asked. "Does it work hard to be wet? Does it strive to reach the ocean?" Priya had to admit that the stream seemed to flow effortlessly, following its natural course without apparent struggle or intention. "Your natural state is already pure awareness," Baba explained. "Trying to purify it is like trying to wash water. Your essential nature is already peaceful. Trying to make it peaceful is like trying to quiet silence. Your deepest being is already free. Trying to liberate it is like trying to release space from its boundaries." "But then what is the purpose of spiritual practice?" Priya asked. "Practice serves the same purpose as cleaning a mirror," Baba replied. "Not to make the mirror's capacity to reflect something new, but to remove what obscures its natural reflectivity. Once the mirror is clean, you don't need to continue cleaning it while you're looking into it." Over the following weeks, Priya gradually understood what Baba meant. The intensive practices she had learned were like cleaning methods that had their place, but once the natural clarity of awareness was recognized, continued effort became unnecessary and even counterproductive. She learned to rest in the awareness that was already present rather than trying to create some new state of consciousness. The most profound teaching at Baba's ashram came through what students called the invitation to stop. At a certain point in each student's stay, usually when they had settled into the rhythm of non-practice, Baba would offer a simple suggestion. Stop trying to be spiritual. Stop working toward enlightenment. Stop practicing altogether. Just be what you already are. This invitation often triggered a crisis for serious spiritual seekers. Without practices to maintain or goals to pursue, many students initially felt lost and purposeless. But those who could accept Baba's invitation discovered something extraordinary. The peace they had been seeking through practice was immediately available when seeking stopped. Priya later described this transition as falling through the bottom of seeking into what was always there. She realized that all her years of practice had been valuable preparation for this moment of recognition, but the recognition itself happened not through more practice, but through the complete relaxation of any effort to achieve anything. When Baba eventually died, students expected the ashram to close or transform into a more conventional teaching center. Instead, they found that the quality of effortless presence he had embodied seemed to have permeated the place itself. Visitors would arrive with complex spiritual agendas and find themselves naturally settling into the same non-practice that Baba had embodied. The teaching continued not through methods or techniques, but through the direct transmission of a way of being that required nothing and offered everything. Like the students at Baba's ashram, you can discover right now what happens when you stop trying to achieve the perfect state for sleep and instead rest in the awareness that's already present. The consciousness that has been observing your efforts to relax doesn't need to be improved or altered. It's already the perfect space for rest to arise naturally. Feel how this recognition allows you to stop managing your experience and simply be present with whatever is happening. Your thoughts can continue their natural movement without your supervision. Your body can continue its natural settling without your guidance. Your breath can continue its natural rhythm without your attention. All of these processes know how to support your movement towards sleep without requiring conscious intervention. This is the space between effort and grace, where sleep becomes not something you achieve, but something you receive. Like a gift that can only be accepted when your hands are finally empty of trying to earn it, rest becomes available when you stop working to deserve it and simply allow yourself to be held by the natural intelligence that has been supporting you all along. The woodcutter's ease with his work, Thant's rediscovery of beginner's mind, Baba's invitation to stop trying, all of these teachings point to the same profound recognition. The peace you seek is what you are seeking from. The rest you desire is what is already resting as your deepest nature. The sleep you're approaching is simply consciousness allowing itself to settle into its own source. Tonight, as you continue this gentle descent into rest, you can practice this ultimate non-practice. Allow everything to be exactly as it is, without trying to improve or change anything. Rest in the awareness that requires no maintenance, needs no development, and lacks nothing. Let this moment of settling into sleep become your most natural expression of the effortless being that you have always been. In this space between effort and grace, between doing and being, between seeking and finding, sleep arrives not as an achievement, but as a homecoming. The threshold you're crossing now leads not to unconsciousness, but to the recognition that consciousness itself is what has been seeking rest, and consciousness itself is the rest that was being sought. Allow yourself now to dissolve completely into this recognition, trusting that what you essentially are never sleeps and never wakes, but simply is, the eternal awareness in which all sleeping and waking arise and pass away like gentle waves on an infinite ocean of peace. From the gentle wisdom of patient awakening, we now arrive at the deepest teaching of all, the discovery of rest that has no beginning and no end, peace that doesn't depend on conditions, and love that supports all beings throughout their journey from one day to the next. Like arriving at the ocean after following many different rivers, we now settle into the vast stillness that has been the source and destination of all the paths we've traveled together tonight. This is the place where all seeking finally comes to rest. Not because you have found what you were looking for elsewhere, but because you have remembered what was never actually lost. The peace you've been seeking through practice and effort, through trying to arrange your life just right or achieve the perfect state of mind, has been here all along, closer than your breath, more intimate than your thoughts, as natural as the awareness that knows these very words. In this final stretch of our journey together, we rest in the understanding that there is nowhere to go and nothing to become. There is only this eternal moment of being, this infinite rest that welcomes you exactly as you are, tired from the day's journey and ready now to dissolve into the loving darkness that cradles all of life in its tender embrace. High in the mountains of ancient Tibet, in a cave so remote that even the sound of wind seemed distant and soft, lived a hermit known throughout the region simply as the eternal sleeper. This was not because he spent all his time unconscious, but because those who encountered him said he seemed to rest in a quality of peace so profound that it was like meeting someone who had discovered the secret of perfect sleep while remaining fully awake. Pilgrims would make arduous journeys to seek his teachings, climbing for days through treacherous mountain passes to reach his simple cave dwelling. But when they arrived, expecting profound discourses or complex meditation instructions, they would find the hermit simply sitting quietly, radiating such complete contentment that many visitors would feel their own restless seeking begin to settle just from being in his presence. The hermit rarely spoke, and when he did, his words were so simple that many visitors initially felt disappointed. They had traveled so far and endured such hardships to reach him, hoping for esoteric knowledge or advanced spiritual techniques. Instead, he would offer tea and perhaps comment on the weather or ask about their journey with genuine but ordinary kindness. But as pilgrims spent time in the hermit's presence, something remarkable would begin to happen. The urgent questions that had driven them to seek him out would start to feel less pressing. The spiritual goals they had been pursuing with such intensity would begin to seem unnecessary. Most surprisingly, the seeking itself, the sense that happiness and peace were somewhere else, requiring effort and achievement to attain, would gradually fade away. One visitor, a scholar who had spent decades studying spiritual texts and practicing complex meditation techniques, spent 3 days with the hermit waiting for some profound teaching. On his final morning, frustrated by the apparent lack of instruction, he asked directly, "Master, I have come so far to learn from you. What is the secret of the peace you embody? What practices should I undertake to achieve your level of realization?" The hermit looked at him with gentle eyes and smiled. "Secret? What secret? I am simply resting. Not resting from something, but resting as the very nature of what I am. You are also this same rest, but you have convinced yourself that you're something that needs to achieve rest, rather than recognizing that you are rest itself, temporarily dreaming that you're someone seeking rest." The scholar was initially confused by this response. "But I feel so restless, so far from peace. How can you say that I am rest itself when my experience is the opposite?" "Look more carefully," the hermit suggested. "What is aware of the restlessness? What notices that you feel far from peace? That which observes even your most agitated states remains perfectly still, doesn't it? Like the sky that remains untroubled whether storms or clear weather move through it. As the scholar sat quietly, considering this pointing, something began to shift in his understanding. He realized that while his thoughts and emotions had been in constant motion, there was indeed something that remained unchangingly present throughout all his experiences. The awareness that knew his thoughts was never actually disturbed by them. The consciousness that observed his emotions was never actually affected by their intensity. This observing awareness, the hermit continued, is not something you possess or develop through practice. It's what you are most fundamentally. All spiritual practice, at its deepest level, is simply the removal of the mistaken identification with the contents of awareness rather than awareness itself. You are not the restless seeker having spiritual experiences. You are the infinite rest in which all experiences, including the experience of seeking, arise and pass away. That morning, as the scholar prepared to leave the hermit's cave, he found that the desperate urgency that had driven his spiritual seeking for decades had simply evaporated. Not because he had achieved some great attainment, but because he had recognized what had been true all along. The peace he had been seeking through countless practices and teachings was the very ground from which his seeking had arisen. Years later, when other seekers would ask him about his time with the eternal sleeper, the former scholar would struggle to explain what had been transmitted. "He didn't teach me anything new," he would say. "He simply helped me recognize what I had never actually forgotten. The rest I was seeking was what I was seeking from. The peace I was trying to achieve was what was already achieving everything through me." The hermit lived in his mountain cave for many more decades, continuing to welcome occasional visitors with the same simple presence. When he finally died, they found his body sitting in perfect meditation posture, as if he had simply allowed his individual life to dissolve back into the infinite rest that had always been his true nature. Local people said that the cave itself seemed to retain a quality of profound peace for years afterward, as if the space had been permanently blessed by his complete surrender to what he called the sleep that never sleeps. Like the eternal sleeper, you can discover right now that the rest you seek is not something to be achieved in the future, but something to be recognized in this very moment. The awareness that is reading these words, the consciousness that has been present throughout your entire day and will remain present throughout your sleep, is itself the infinite rest that needs nothing and lacks nothing. Feel how this recognition brings an immediate settling, like a bird that has been flying for hours, finally landing on a branch it didn't know was there. The effort to find peace can relax, because peace reveals itself to be the very space in which effort arises. The seeking for rest can end because rest is discovered to be what is seeking. This doesn't mean that your individual experience of tiredness or the need for sleep disappears. Your body still benefits from horizontal rest. Your mind still requires the restoration that comes through dreams. Your nervous system still needs the renewal that sleep provides. But these individual needs are now held within a larger understanding that you are simultaneously the temporary person who sleeps and the eternal awareness that never sleeps. Right now, as your body settles toward physical rest, you can also settle into the recognition of this boundless awareness that requires no rest because it has never been disturbed. Like the ocean that remains essentially still even when waves move across its surface, this fundamental consciousness remains at perfect peace even while thoughts, sensations, and experiences continue their natural movement. Your breathing can become a bridge between these two levels of understanding. Each breath is happening to the individual body that needs rest and restoration. But each breath is also arising within the infinite space of awareness that is always already complete and at peace. You can rest simultaneously as both the temporary person settling into sleep and the eternal presence that encompasses all sleeping and waking. There was once a village beside a great lake where the water was so still and clear that it perfectly reflected the sky above. The villagers had lived beside this lake for countless generations, but they had developed a curious habit. Instead of drawing their water directly from the lake, they would collect only the reflection of water that appeared in various pools and puddles around the village. This strange practice had begun long ago, during a time when the villagers had forgotten that the vast lake existed. Their ancestors had become so focused on the small bodies of water they could see close to their homes that they gradually lost awareness of the great source from which all the smaller pools were fed. As generations passed, the memory of the lake faded completely, and the villagers came to believe that the scattered puddles were the only water available to them. As you might imagine, this approach to water gathering was quite difficult. The puddles were small and often muddy. They would sometimes dry up completely during hot weather, leaving the villagers anxious about their water supply. During storms, the puddles would become choppy and unclear, making the water unpleasant to drink. The villagers spent enormous amounts of time and energy trying to manage their collection system, building complex networks of channels and containers to gather water from the various small sources. Some villagers became experts at predicting which puddles would have the clearest water on any given day. Others developed elaborate techniques for purifying the muddy water they collected. A few claimed to have found secret puddles that contained especially pure water, but these turned out to be no more reliable than any others. Despite all their efforts and expertise, the villagers never felt entirely secure about their water supply. One day, a child who had been playing near the village edge made a remarkable discovery. Chasing a ball that had rolled away from the usual play area, she found herself at the shore of the great lake that her village had forgotten. The water was so clear and still that she could see fish swimming far below the surface. It was so abundant that she couldn't see the far shore, and it was so peaceful that just looking at it filled her with a calm she had never experienced before. When the child ran back to tell the adults about her discovery, they initially didn't believe her. "Impossible," they said. "We know where all the water sources are. We've been collecting water here for generations." But curiosity eventually overcame skepticism, and a few villagers agreed to follow the child to see what she had found. The adults were amazed by what they discovered. Here was water so plentiful that their small collection containers seemed almost comical in comparison. Here was water so pure that all their elaborate purification systems were completely unnecessary. Here was water so reliable that they would never need to worry about scarcity again. But perhaps most remarkable of all was the realization that this great lake was the actual source of all the small puddles they had been struggling to collect from. The scattered pools around the village were not separate water sources, but temporary gatherings of water that had evaporated from the lake and returned as rain or seeped through underground channels from the same vast source. From that day forward, the villagers' entire relationship with water was transformed. They still used smaller containers for daily convenience, but they knew these were fed by an inexhaustible source. They still experienced occasional dry spells when puddles would disappear, but they no longer panicked because they knew the Great Lake was always there. Most importantly, they could finally relax their anxious efforts to secure water, knowing they were surrounded by abundance beyond anything they could ever need. Like the villagers who had forgotten about the Great Lake, most of us have become so focused on trying to collect peace and happiness from individual experiences that we've forgotten the infinite source from which all satisfying moments arise. We try to gather rest from sleep, joy from pleasant events, security from favorable circumstances, love from other people, not realizing that all of these temporary satisfactions are simply reflections of the boundless contentment that is our deepest nature. The awareness that is present right now as you listen to these words is like that great lake, vast, clear, inexhaustibly abundant, and the true source of all the temporary pools of peace you've been trying to collect throughout your life. You don't need to gather rest from sleep any more than the villagers needed to collect water from puddles once they rediscovered the lake. You can enjoy sleep as a beautiful expression of rest, but you don't need to depend on it for the fundamental peace that you are. This recognition transforms your approach to falling asleep from seeking to receiving. You're no longer trying to achieve rest through sleep, but allowing sleep to be one more beautiful expression of the rest that you fundamentally are. Like a wave that doesn't need to search for the ocean because it is the ocean in motion, you don't need to search for peace because you are peace temporarily expressing itself as someone preparing for sleep. Feel how this understanding allows an even deeper letting go than anything you've experienced so far tonight. There's nothing you need to accomplish through sleep because the restoration you seek is already fully present as your own deepest nature. There's nothing you need to escape from through unconsciousness because even your most difficult experiences are arising within the infinite peace that you are. Your body can settle completely now, knowing that it's resting not just on the bed beneath you, but in the boundless love that supports all existence. Your mind can release its final holdings, knowing that any thoughts or dreams that arise during sleep will be held within the same vast awareness that is holding them right now. Your heart can open completely to this moment, knowing that you are finally and forever home. The great secret that the eternal sleeper embodied, that the villagers rediscovered by the forgotten lake, is available to you right now. Not as something to be achieved through practice or effort, but as something to be recognized as the most obvious and intimate truth of your existence. You are the infinite rest you've been seeking. You are the boundless peace you've been trying to achieve. You are the inexhaustible love you've been hoping to find. As your individual consciousness prepares to dissolve into sleep, it's dissolving into its own source, like a wave settling back into the ocean from which it never was actually separate. The awareness that will remain present even during the deepest sleep is not different from the awareness that is present now. Sleep and waking are simply different movements within the same vast consciousness that you are. In the old Buddhist texts, there is a beautiful description of what they call the natural liberation of sleep. Instead of seeing sleep as a temporary loss of consciousness, it's understood as consciousness returning to its natural state of boundless rest. Instead of waking up from sleep, we wake up as sleep, recognizing that even our deepest unconsciousness is held within infinite awareness. Tonight, as you surrender to this natural liberation, you can rest in the confidence that you are not losing consciousness, but discovering its true nature. You are not becoming absent, but becoming present to dimensions of your being that are usually obscured by the activity of waking life. You are not falling into darkness, but settling into the luminous void from which all light emerges. The stars that shine in the night sky are resting in the same vast space that holds your sleeping consciousness. The mountains that remain stable through all weather are expressions of the same unshakable peace that you fundamentally are. The ocean that continues its patient breathing of waves is moved by the same life force that will sustain you through this night's rest and carry you safely into tomorrow's awakening. There is nothing to fear in this surrender because you are surrendering into your own deepest nature. There is nothing to lose in this letting go because you are letting go into what you have always been. There is nothing to achieve through this rest, because rest is what is achieving everything, including this perfect moment of settling into sleep. The eternal sleeper's final teaching, whispered to a student just before his death, was simply this: there is only one consciousness, appearing as many beings dreaming they are separate. Sleep well in the knowledge that you have never been apart from the source of all rest, and you will wake tomorrow remembering more of who you have always been. Sleep now in this infinite rest, beloved friend. Sleep in the certainty that you are held by love that has no beginning and no end. Sleep in the peace that surpasses understanding because it is understanding itself, recognizing its own nature. Sleep in the knowledge that this rest is not temporary refuge from life, but life itself expressing its most essential nature. And as consciousness fades into the beautiful darkness of sleep, know that what you are in your deepest essence never sleeps and never wakes, but simply is, eternal, infinite, and forever at peace. Rest well in this boundless love that you are, that supports all beings, and that will greet you with fresh wonder when the morning light returns. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Sleepy Monk.